going to set this up here so it's still
Why is it that when I search for something like this, I just find this? It shouldn't be so hard for us to find women in these roles. That's why AT&T is working with initiatives like See Her to give girls like me a more realistic look of women in media, so that by 2020, my search might look a little more like this.
Good morning, and welcome to the 9th Annual Women in the World Summit. At this time, please silence all electronic devices. Flash photography is not permitted in the theater. Thank you.
You pay me what I'm worth. You give me what I'm worth.
They say that us kids don't know what we're talking about. We know! Yes!
So I'm hyperventilating a little bit. If I fall over, pick me up because I've got some things to say.
The men have to be part of the solution.
I am here today to acknowledge and represent the African American girls whose stories don't make the front page of every national newspaper.
Women are in the world, and we will not be bullied.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tina Brown, and I'm going to welcome you now to day 2 of the 9th Women in the World Summit. Last night was absolutely amazing. From the silence breakers in the Me Too movement, those incredibly brave women from Italy, to the righteous Viola Davis. It was a blowout, start to finish, and everybody brought their A game. And we have another remarkable lineup today. You're going to hear from women who are getting in the face of the establishment to gain equal pay. They are a rousing trio. You'll see them in a minute. And in this age of strong men around the world, Hillary Clinton will do something that, to my knowledge, that she's never done. She'll lead a conversation with 4 other strong women, 4 women journalists who are challenging autocrats around the world. Senators Gillibrand and Murkowski are joining us, 2 lightning throwers from both sides of the aisle. The heroic Sally Yates is here. She went from Attorney General to former Attorney General in just 10 days for standing up to President Trump. Rare backbone, I have to say. And you will hear from the fearless Topeka Sam, who's turned her own years of incarceration into a campaign for justice reform for women. Of course, none of this would be possible at all without our generous sponsors. Our leadership sponsor, AT&T, the Boston Consulting Group, MasterCard, P&G, and UBS Financial Services. Our supporting sponsors, the Rockefeller Foundation and Thomson Reuters, and our media sponsor, the New York Times. And I want to single out, of course, our long-time presenting sponsor, Toyota, our partner for 7 years now. Thank you so much, Toyota, for your loyalty. With their Mothers of Invention program, they are building a powerful network of women who are solving local and national and global problems. And you're going to meet some of these incredible young women during the summit. It's my pleasure to now introduce a woman who is a stellar leader in the Toyota team, Jacqueline Birdsall, Senior Engineer, Toyota Motor North America. Take it away, Jacqueline. Where are you?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Tina, for that kind introduction. And thank you all for showing your support for female changemakers by being here today. As Tina mentioned, I'm a senior engineer, but I also lead a group called Women Influencing and Impacting Toyota at our research and development facility in California, whose mission is to promote the talent and visibility of the women of Toyota through continued learning, self-development, and leadership. We see firsthand the importance of women supporting one another for continued success. Likewise, Toyota began the Mothers of Invention program in 2012 to identify and celebrate women leaders who are driven to change the world through innovation and entrepreneurship. To date, we've honored 22 women of exceptional vision who are solving the world's problems by developing solutions to food, water, shelter, healthcare, safety, sanitation, and education. Now, in addition to building great cars, Toyota is committed to creating mobility solutions for an ever better society for the next 100 years and beyond. And that's why we honor the Mothers of Invention by awarding a $50,000 grant to each of their companies. We've given more than $1 million so far, and we're just getting started. Actually, more than a dozen of our Toyota MOIs are in attendance here at the summit. And let me give you a few examples. Hannah Alexander of Soul Power, who discovered how to generate power using kinetic energy and in turn invented a hiking boot with a battery pack in the insole charged by walking. Construction companies are using this technology to provide GPS tracking for the crew to manage safety and productivity. Day One Response, Well Aware, and Luminade, whose help Toyota enlisted when hurricanes struck Texas, Florida, and Puerto Rico. They brought water purification bags and lightweight solar-charged lanterns and phone chargers to disaster-stricken areas. And Komal Dadlani of Lab4U, who is democratizing education through her mobile application that turns cameras and sensors built into phones or tablets into laboratory equipment. Already, she's seen test scores increase as students are able to apply hands-on what they have learned in their textbooks. So throughout the summit, we hope that you'll get the chance to meet these remarkable women, check out their stories at our social wall, and to become as inspired as I am by their optimism, intelligence, and grit. And then, I ask you to take their examples with you and to let them move you to conquer the impossible in your corner of the world. By working together to tackle the world's biggest challenges, the Toyota Mothers of Invention network can grow even larger, even stronger, and to make an even bigger impact on the lives of others. Thank you.
To earn the same amount as their male counterparts make in 1 year, women have to work 1 year and part of the next year, too.
If you become president, will a woman make the same as a man?
You're gonna make the same if you do as good a job.
We don't have equal pay for equal work in this country.
It makes me angry for the other women that I think go through this.
It's our time to have wage equality once and for all.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Cynthia McFadden, the Senior Investigative and Legal Correspondent at NBC News, and it's a pleasure to kick off this morning with the first panel, which is on a subject that I know you'll all agree is of vital importance. When the Equal Pay Act was enacted in 1963, women made 58 cents for every dollar a man made. Women still only make 80 cents for every dollar, but think about it. My math skills aren't so great, but even I can figure out that's an increase of less than a half a cent a year. Surely, we can do better than that. We have a panel here who's going to help us understand how. So, Carrie, quick round robin. Let's start with you. Carrie blew the whistle on the gender pay gap at the BBC. When you found out you were being paid 50% less than your male counterparts. Tell us how you found out, and tell us what you did about it.
Morning, everybody. Morning, New York. It's so great to be here. Cynthia, thanks for the question. I just want to tell everybody, I'm wearing my Equals t-shirt because I don't get to wear it on BBC TV every day. So I thought I'd wear it for all of you. I wear it when we're protesting. So I found out about my personal pay gap last July, so kind of a few months ago now, when the BBC was forced by the British government to release a little bit of transparency about pay over £150,000 a year for on-screen talent. I mean, not exact figures, but £50,000 bands. And I discovered that, you know, of the two, I was the BBC's China editor, and there were 4 international editors: North America, Middle East, China, and Europe. And basically, the 2 men were being paid a lot more than the 2 women. And so at that point, it was a kind of moment of first numbness, really. I couldn't quite, it took me a while to kind of internalize that this was so bad, because before I went to China, I had insisted that they pay me equally, and they said they were doing that. So it was a particular shock at that point to discover that it really wasn't happening. Just to recap for a moment, in the BBC, for many years, many women felt they were being paid a lot less than the men, but we had no way of knowing, because the pay culture, despite being a public sector organization using the public's money, and despite, you know, declared values of transparency and accountability and trust and truth, the BBC was incredibly secretive about pay, certainly for talent pay. So we guessed it, but we didn't know the details. Then, this last July, we discovered some details, and I thought at that point, after I got over the numbness, dismay, rage, guilt of not having done anything about it beforehand, I thought, well, look, we have to put this right. I just turned 55. It's like, enough's enough. At some point, you have to stand up and say, this won't go on anymore, not on my watch. I need to make sure that... I'm a 55-year-old woman. I'm one of the BBC's top reporters. They constantly say how brilliant I am, and yet they won't pay me like a man. It's just not going to work, so I was prepared to take some risks for it. So first, just to kind of cut the story fairly brief, you have to go through everything is stacked against you in an equal pay fight as a woman. Everything's stacked against you, despite the fact that the law in the UK, as in the US, declares for equal pay. The law is a beautiful thing, but it just doesn't apply in many situations. And that is because you can't find out what the man next to you earns. You don't, and once you do find out, like you find a little crack of light, like in my case, you then spend 3 months doing an internal equal pay complaint. Your bosses then go, la, 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 can't hear you. Then you go to a formal grievance, which takes 3 months, where they basically, which feels, anyway, I have to be careful because I'm still employed by the BBC. I resigned my China post over equal pay, but I'm still employed, and obviously there are disciplinary, contractual issues, so I have to be a little bit careful what I say.
They wouldn't dare fire you now.
They probably wouldn't dare fire me now, but, you know, they have done some strange things. So, and at the point where I went public, definitely, you know, a lot of people feared that I would be fired. Anyway, grievance, then an appeal process, which is what I'm currently in. But it's a battle internal, and then if you're going to battle external, you've got to contend with the dealing with the law. And the burden of proof is on the woman against a mighty employer with all the consultants, all the lawyers, all the HR department, and all the PR spin. And that is a mighty, mighty opponent for any single woman to undertake.
Well, and your courage gives lots of other people hope. We're going to come back to more of the details because you have really taken them on. Saru, I want you to talk a little bit. You represent over 35,000 restaurant employees, people who are in a very different position when it comes to the gender pay gap. And I want you to help us understand with the sub-minimum wage, many of these people live, right, especially the women, live on tips, and that changes the whole calculus.
That's right.
Welcome and talk to us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So the restaurant industry right now is about to hit the 13 million worker mark. So 1 in 11 American workers currently works in the industry. 1 in 2 people in this room, and I can't see you that well, but how many people in this room worked in the industry at some point in their lifetime? Will you look around the room? I mean, 1 in 2 Americans, 1 in 2 women has worked in the industry at some point in their lifetime, and that impacts all of us because we have the highest rates of sexual harassment and we have legalized gender pay inequity. And that is because of the money, power, and influence of a trade lobby called the National Restaurant Association. It represents the chains. We call it the other NRA. It has been named one of the top 10 most powerful lobby groups in Congress and in every state legislature. And in doing research for my last book, found out, in fact, that it has been around 150 years since the emancipation of the slaves. When tipping first came to the United States from feudal Europe, where it was always something an aristocrat gave to a serf or a vassal on top of a wage, never instead of a wage. But when that idea came to the States, the restaurant industry demanded the right to hire newly freed slaves, because it was right around the time of emancipation, not pay them anything at all, and let them live on customer tips. And that idea that a black, actually even at that time mostly female workforce, could live on a $0 wage and live on tips was codified into the very first minimum wage law that passed in 1938 as part of the New Deal. And we went from a $0 wage in 1938 to a whopping $2.13 an hour, which is the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers in these United States in 2018. And it ranges
So say
between
it again.
$2.13 an hour is the actual wage of millions of women across America who are forced to live on tips because $2 is not an actual wage. It's a literal slave wage. It's not a rhetorical slave wage. It's a literal slave wage. And it goes between $2 and $7 in 43 states, including right here. New York State is one of the 43 states that continues to perpetuate this legacy of slavery. Based on the Restaurant Association's argument, it's okay. These are white guys working in fancy fine dining steakhouses. They're making a ton of money in tips. There's no reason for us to pay them a wage. Customers should pay our workers' wages for us. And so, in reality, 70% of tipped workers in New York and in America are, guess who? They are women. They are women largely working in IHOP and Applebee's and Olive Garden. They suffer from 3 times the poverty rate of the rest of the U.S. workforce. They use food stamps at double the rate. And worst of all, and this is where gender pay inequity and sexual harassment are directly linked, because they suffer from the highest rates of sexual harassment of any industry. Because when you're a woman earning 2, 3, 4, 5, any lower wage and required to live on tips to earn your income, you must tolerate all kinds of inappropriate customer behavior in order to feed your family in tips. And how do we know that connection is true? Well, there are 7 states that got rid of this legacy of slavery many decades ago, including California. And in these 7 states, we find the restaurant industry is required to pay, God forbid, a full minimum wage to women, 100% of the wage to women, with tips on top, as it was in feudal Europe. And in these 7 states, you have higher restaurant sales per capita, the industry's growing, higher job growth in the industry, higher rates of tipping, and half the rate of sexual harassment. Because when a woman gets a full wage, she has power. She doesn't have to put up with anything and everything from the customer in order to feed her family. She has the security of knowing she actually is earning a wage, for goodness sake. And so we are calling for every state, including New York, to get rid of this lower wage for tipped workers, to pay women an actual wage and let tips be on top of that, because here we are talking about gender pay inequity in so many sectors. In our sector, it's legalized. You've got a mostly female workforce earning about 1/5 of what a mostly male workforce is earning in the rest of the industry.
Thank you so much for that. Wow.
Thank you.
We should say you also teach at Berkeley. I envy your students,
Yeah.
but you have to write really fast.
Yeah, I talk fast, sorry.
I saw the First Lady of New York nodding during that.
Yes,
Before-
my daughter is a restaurant worker. I'm horrified. I am.
Well, when you hear the facts, as Saru was presenting them, you think about this in a different way. Is this something that might be a conversation tonight at the...
Absolutely, absolutely. This cannot continue, and I believe that government can be a game changer. I mean, we have to move on. This is not the 1960s anymore. Women are sole earners in their households, and 40% of households around the nation Women are the primary earners or sole earners in their household. They've got to support families on these wages, and it cannot continue like this.
In fact, you and your husband's administration are trying to do something about this in New York. In October, you announced new legislation. Tell us about that and how you think it can make a difference.
That's right. It is a step in the right direction. We have we are the only municipality in the nation to enforce salary ban history and to hold employers accountable. Employers who ask about a woman's salary, her previous salary, so that they can pay her less going forward, that's illegal. It's illegal now.
As opposed to what the job is worth, how much you can get away with paying her.
That's right. That's right. It's common practice to see how much one can get away with paying based on a previous salary. And as you know, that stays with a woman like forever. You know, if you start at a low wage and then you're paid just a little bit more in the next job and the next job, you know, you're going to make so much less money over a lifetime, millions in many cases. And we know that women collectively make $1 trillion less than men every year.
$1 trillion?
$1 trillion less.
And that's just in New York. No, I'm kidding.
No, across the nation, across the nation.
It feels that way.
It does feel that way. But that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. So, okay, how much pushback did you get from employers about this? And can you actually enforce it?
Yes, there's a lot of pushback, but people have come around, so it's now the law, and we do have enforcement capability, and that's what is different from us. That's what differentiates us from other states and cities that do have a ban, like California, Oregon, Massachusetts. We can actually enforce it. Employers can be fined up to $250,000 if they violate this law. And that does not include money for emotional distress. Our City Commission on Human Rights can take an employer to task for asking these questions and doing the wrong thing.
Wow. Okay, so if you're employed in New York and your new employer, prospective employer asks you, we're going to post her phone number. No. Call the Human Rights Commission because you really have potentially an actionable claim. I want to just point out, Iceland's female prime minister is making pay inequality illegal in her country, and New Zealand's prime minister has pledged to reach gender parity in 4 years. I want to say, I'm just back from New Zealand, having interviewed the new head of state there, who is, Tina and I were talking, we're going to have her here next year, I hope, because she is amazing. And if anyone can get this done, she can. She's also pregnant. She's also not married. She's also the youngest world leader in the world, 37 years old. We did the interview barefooted in her living room because she just had the carpets cleaned. Okay. It's going to be on the Today Show on Tuesday. Carrie, now you have not led the BBC up on this one. I mean, this was not just like a backroom deal where you're like, okay, well, pay me what I'm worth and I'll be quiet and go away. No. You appeared before the House of Commons to testify about what happened to you, and there's a part of that hearing that I'd like our audience to see. Take a look.
The thing that's very unacceptable to me, I just don't know why they do this, is they've basically said that in those 3 previous years, 2014, 2015, and 2016, I was in development. It is an insult to add to the original injury. Yeah. It is unacceptable to talk to your senior women like that. I would never have gone to China on those terms. I asked for equal pay at the very beginning. The idea that I would have agreed to being sent to China in development. I was, for 4 years, leading our China coverage.
Woo! As a personal matter, was it hard to step forward and say that?
No, because, you try and put me down, you try and intimidate me, you try and squash me, and you are going to meet a fighter. It's always a bad idea to antagonize a woman like that by trying to get inside your head. These games happen, and I'm not invulnerable to these games that managers play. But that one doesn't work with me. You try and put me down. I know I was a great China editor. I wasn't just an average China editor. I gave it every ounce of my stamina, every ounce of my skill, every ounce of my talent, every ounce of my 30 years of learning my craft as a journalist at the BBC, every ounce of my Chinese language skills. I really worked hard. And anyone who knows me and is honest and impartial at the BBC would back that up.
Woo! So now, but I want to, so let me just, the BBC came to you and said, okay, just kidding, we'd like to give you a raise. We'd like to make this right. And you said,
get lost. Because you know what they did and what they're still doing is trying to deal with the problem. They didn't really see this problem coming because they thought they could pick all the women off. This is another mistake they made. They thought they could pick all the women off. They never really realized what they thought. I want to tell the story briefly, but what they thought was going to be the problem when when the government forced them to release these figures. And they fought transparency every inch of the way. But what they thought was going to happen was that the tabloids in the UK were going to come down on them like a ton of bricks for paying a lot of men too much money. And it was going to be a typical, familiar, ritual, BBC spends too much money on talent story. What they didn't realize was that they were going to get a big problem with women when the figures were released because of the difference. And also an ethnic diversity problem, because that was the other thing that came out of those figures when they were released last summer. So anyway, the women got going, we got talking, and they totally underestimated us. Because they thought they could get away with it by just like picking off a few people, like offering me a raise, which the parliamentarians there, I mean, it's like, that was amazing when Parliament had a hearing on it, because the parliamentarians basically, you know, there were people in Parliament popping up and down saying, how dare the BBC try to solve this with a bung for women, you know, basically accusing the BBC of trying to bribe women off.
Well, that is what they were trying to do.
You said that, not me. I mean, I still have a contract. The thing is that they tried to offer me some money, and I said...
Quite a lot of money.
Yeah, so they offered me like about a third of a raise. They offered me £45,000 on top of a salary of £135,000. Now, they only offered it for 2017, and that was still made me nowhere near equal to the men. I had already, by that stage, written to our Director General. I had met our Director General. I'd met my Director of News. I'd met everybody involved, and I'd said, do not try to buy me off, because it won't work. I'm not interested in your money, because I'm interested in the principle of equality and securing systemic change for this generation of women and for future generations of women. Woo! So it was a very, strategically and tactically, it was in many ways a very difficult fight, because typically, what was done in the tabloid media in the UK was the attempt to present the women who were asking for equal pay at the BBC as spoilt, entitled, greedy prima donnas. So when I went public, which was 6 months after the row began, and after I had concluded that the internal process, the informal complaint, the formal grievance and so on weren't working, the BBC was not seriously going to budge on the systemic change we needed, at that point, I made it very clear. I had previously made it clear internally, but I made it very clear to the audience when I wrote a public letter to the BBC audience saying, I do not want the money. I want the principle of equality to be asserted. I want the BBC to acknowledge that my work as China editor in those 4 years was of equal value to the men. You need to tell me how much money you owe me, because I knew that that would be uncomfortable for them. And it's only by causing them discomfort that you can enforce systemic change. So I needed them to acknowledge the equality of the work. And that point about a career, the point that you make about previous salaries, I know we'll come back to it, but that really matters in my story as well, because of being a mum and all the rest of it, and your salary just doesn't approach. So there are men who are on a completely different trajectory from you. So it is partly historic, the problem that then arises. But I knew that they would find it very hard to acknowledge the equality of my work, because they find it so hard to admit mistakes. And I knew that they would find it very hard in public to acknowledge how much they were paying the alpha males. And they haven't done so yet.
Oh, yet, I think, is the operative term there. I have so many things I want to talk about, but let's focus in. I just want a quick thought from you. all restaurants are not created equal. There's one that we're both familiar with in San Francisco, Zazie, which is just one of several, who has started paying restaurant workers differently. Can you talk about how some restaurants are doing this?
Yeah, so we have an association of about 500 restaurants around the country, including Danny Meyer here in New York, and Tom Colicchio, and Andrew Tarlow, and Zazie's in California, and Daniel Patterson, Alice Waters, all around the country, small and large, who are actually working with us to say this system is antiquated, it's a legacy of slavery, it's a source of sexual harassment, and time's up, and it's just got to go. And so that movement has really, of restaurants, we started with 200 over the last year. It's grown to 500, thanks to President Trump in part, and thanks, because he's really fueled a lot of restaurants to come our way. But also, and thanks to Time's Up, you saw the picture of me with Amy Poehler at the Golden Globes. I mean, the power right now of women standing together across sectors, from Hollywood actresses to restaurant workers, domestic workers, farm workers, standing together has resulted in real change, so much so that Governor Cuomo has announced that he will move forward to, yes, look into making New York the 8th state in the union after California to eliminate this lower wage for tipped workers. But we need all of your help. Because the Restaurant Association, of course, is fighting it hard and trying to terrify everybody and say it's a bad idea. We shouldn't have to pay our own workers' wages. So we need your help as consumers to support restaurants that are moving in a different direction, like Danny and others. And also encourage your favorite restaurants to say, this is a good change, it's good for us as consumers. All of us should move in the direction of paying women a full wage with tips on top.
Fierce earrings, too, by the way, let's just say.
Say it again?
Sorry.
We're the majority of the population,
Exactly.
right? It's not just as consumers.
Right.
We are the majority. If there's something that we want, and we want this, all we have to do is stand together and insist on it, demand it.
So, Madam First Lady, I mean, if things are bad for women, they're worse for women of color.
Absolutely.
So in New York City, black women make 55 cents on the dollar, Hispanic women 45 cents on the dollar. Why is that?
Well, we all know why that is. And then it's a continuation of the hierarchy, the position that women have been in over the centuries. And of course, women of color are at the very bottom of the ladder. And it's a struggle. It's really a struggle to get out. We have to change the whole framework. We're never going to be able to get what we're worth, get paid what we're worth for our education, our skill level, until we change the whole framework. We need more women in power. We need more women to say, this is what we value, and this is what women should get paid. In New York City, I think that we see a reflection of that. We have more women in senior leadership positions than ever before. And so now we have pre-K. Now we have the salary ban on the salary history ban. We have so many more benefits, maternity leave, that we never had before because women are at the decision-making table. So if we have to rely on men to make the changes for us, it's just not going to happen as fast or completely as we want. We have to be there at the decision-making table with the power to make the changes that we want.
Absolutely. So there are two more things I want to hit on before we run out of time and get the hook. One is motherhood. A study just published in the New York Times that said women who take off those critical career-building years of 25 to 35 to raise children never catch up. Never catch up, whatever, across industries, race, etc. Now, question. The woman who stays in the workforce during that period of time, either with children or without, should she not make more money than the woman who was opted out for those 10 years? Think it through with me.
So I would say, Cynthia, that the problem is even deeper than that. The woman who stays in the workplace is still falling behind in the trajectory. So you're not even dealing with
it's not an even playing field to start.
Well, so take me for an example, and many of the women I know, because one of the things that gives me confidence in talking about the situation at the BBC is that women at the BBC are increasingly united. We discuss all of these issues among ourselves. We know what we're dealing with. We've built a very impressive degree of solidarity. And so what I realized from that, and it has really, I knew it from my own case, but it's shocking when it comes back and over and over and over and over again, the number of stories of women facing maternity discrimination, their posts disappear as soon as they announce that they're pregnant, or as soon as they go off to, the posts aren't there when they come back again. I mean, this is against the law. And in my own case, it's like I was a mother, working mother. I took only weeks off to have because I was the sole breadwinner in my family. I had to go back to work with young children, first time, second time. I have 2 kids, both times, fairly soon after I gave birth. And I've always been in the workplace. I'm like the BBC's only China specialist who's also a top broadcaster. It's like, and yet look at my situation. So my point has always been, and it's only recently, by the way, that I've learned to boast like this. I'm trying to learn to assert my value. because this is another thing. I'm guessing a lot of you out there are mothers too. We spend our lives divided between feeling that we're inadequate at work, feeling that we're inadequate at home, having imposter syndrome all the time, and actually not understanding our value. And it's only when you know, one of the things about the solidarity that we built among BBC women is like, you think you're not good enough to earn the same as the bloke who's doing the same job as you, but when you look at the other women who are also being told this in their salaries, or because they're whatever, and then you think, oh, no, that's not right, because that person is amazing, and that's not right that they're not being paid as much as a bloke. So when you see this, you hear this echoing back, and ripples and ripples and ripples, and you realize, oh, there's a big pattern going on here. Women who have children are just never going to be on the same trajectory.
And in the restaurant business is a whole extra issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a question. Nobody gets a raise in our business at all, whether you stay or you go. But if most women are forced to leave when they have children, because if you live on tips, you rely on Friday and Saturday night shifts. Who's going to watch your kid overnight? There's no childcare, overnight childcare where most of these folks live. But here's the thing is, so many of you said you worked in the industry when you were young, and whether you stay or you leave and you go on to do something else, this experience shapes you for the rest of your life, so that if your first job is a manager telling you, dress more sexy, show more cleavage, wear tighter clothing in order to make more money in tips. I've had so many women, professional women in other professions saying, you know, I've been sexually harassed, I've had gender pay inequity later in life, but I didn't do anything about it because it was never as bad as it was when I was a young woman working in restaurants, which means our industry shapes the way our daughters see themselves for the rest of their lives, and we have to do something about it. We have to change the fact that women are paid a fifth of what men are paid in their first job, and forced to tolerate that incredible harassment.
So this has been incredibly inspiring, and I want you to bless this by telling us you've lived the life of an advocate. You have changed the way people with mental illness are viewed in this city and more broadly, which is so important. I want you to tell us, as having lived the life of an advocate, how do we go forth and make change?
Oh, we have to raise our voices, we have to march, we have to protest, we have to be ourselves on a job and make those requests forcefully. You know, women cannot be, if women are successful, everyone is successful. And men have to be partners in this and making this change. We have to demand that they walk beside us, march beside us, and ask for these changes too, because we will not move ahead as a society with more than half of us being paid less, being treated less, and with the whole negative mental effect on of feeling that we have no worth, no value. It's not going to work. It's not sustainable.
And do you think that time's up?
Time's up.
Time's up. Time's up.
Our time's up too. Thank you so much. Thanks to the panel. You are amazing. Bravo.
We will not stop until the last drug lord, the last financier, and the last pusher have surrendered.
Pag-akyat mamaya-maya, naliligo ako. Sabi ng kapitbahay namin, Celia, yung anak mo patay na ano?
Malayo pa lang ako. Paa pa lang ng asawa ko nakikita ko. Alam ko na.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm John Avalon, editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast, and it is my honor to have a conversation with an extraordinary, courageous, and talented journalist, Patricia Evangelista from the Philippines.
Thank you for having me.
Patricia, your work is inspiring, your prose is extraordinary, but before we get into the human cost of the drug war, I want folks to get a deeper sense of who President Duterte is, how he governs, and the threat he may represent.
Well, in the beginning, President Duterte was a mayor of a city south of the Philippines. And I suppose it would be easy to describe him when he was campaigning as something of a man's man. He liked motorcycles, he liked guns, he liked what he called the weaker sex, particularly the pretty ones. He would kiss them during his campaigns, lips to lips, because he said that way was delicious. He said quite a number of things that other politicians never said before. He said that he was a killer, that he had pushed a man out of a helicopter and was willing to do it again, that he killed when he was angry and he had killed more than 1,000, and that he wandered the streets of his city looking for criminals to kill as an example to his policemen. And then he said that if he won, he would kill 100,000 criminals, that the fishes in Manila Bay would grow fat with the corpses of criminals. And then he said morticians would grow rich with the deluge of dead. So the people thought he was bold and brave and exactly what they needed. He said change was coming. So on the day he was inaugurated, he stood on a stage before some of the poorest of the Philippines, and he said, I am telling you now, do not go into drugs because I will kill you. It may not be tonight, it may not be tomorrow, but in 6 years you will make a mistake and I will go after you. And of course, after that, he said that if you know of any addicts, maybe you should kill them yourself because it would be a kindness to their parents.
And what is the death toll in the wake of this self-declared war on drugs today?
Officially, there are 4,075 killed by the police. The narrative is that each one of these drug suspects fought back in perhaps raids, in search warrants, all of these things.
So the police killed them in self-defense is the official line.
Yes, the argument is self-defense. But as you've seen from the pictures earlier, these are not all police killings. In the beginning, we call them vigilante killings, sometimes extrajudicial killings. The police call them deaths under investigation. There may be 16,000 deaths under investigation, according to the police. And generally, the narrative is the same. The suspect, the man, will be shot by drive-by motorcycles, or his body will be thrown down the street, already dead. And in some of the worst cases, in some of the photos you've seen, his hands will be bound, his ankles will be bound, his face will be wrapped by the sort of packing tape you use to pack boxes. And then there will be a sign beside the body that says drug dealer. In the worst case that we've heard, there was a body, the particulars were the same. The body was on the ground, the sign was beside the body, he was bound, fists and ankles. And then when the police flipped the body over, because he was face down, somebody had picked up the same marking pen that they used to draw on the sign to say that he was an addict, and drew on his face eyes, nose, and a smiling mouth. Manila is where murder has become a meme.
Murder has become a meme.
Yes.
So in your reporting, what's the context of this drug on war? Is Philippines' drug problem greater than other countries? And what's the cultural impact of this spate of vigilante and police murders?
In truth, from some accounts, the Philippines has roughly half the global average when it comes to drug use. But the president says the numbers are much higher. The numbers changed, 3 million, 3.7 million, 4 million. Then the president fired the head of the Dangerous Drugs Board for giving a much lower number because he contradicted the government. And the president also doesn't delineate between a drug addict, a drug user, someone who used marijuana once in the last 13 months, or someone who was openly selling drugs. He says that anyone who has used meth and continually uses meth is beyond rehabilitation. It's not a health problem. He is beyond rehabilitation because his brain has shrunken so much that he is unable to be rehabilitated and he will beat his father and sell his children and will be useless to society. So these are the idiots, and I quote, destroying his country.
And so murder is the utilitarian response for society.
The president says kill them all.
Kill them all.
He is specific on which of his citizens he would prefer killed. These are the drug dealers, the drug addicts, the people he has demonized. However, he also says that these killings are not state-sponsored, that they are not violating human rights, and that in all probability, these are just drug cartels killing each other.
And yet he remains extraordinarily popular as a president.
Yes, he is.
How does that corrupt the culture of the society? How does that define deviancy down?
Well, I think this is going to last long after he is no longer president. Because when the international community was arguing the possibility that the country or the president has committed crimes against humanity, the president said, frankly, are they human?
Frankly, are they human?
Yes. And on the worst day of the drug war, 32 people were killed by the police in a single city in a single night. And the next morning, the president said, it was beautiful.
It was beautiful.
And that if more people were killed in that fashion, then perhaps the drug scourge would end.
When you're reporting these stories, going into these communities, the terror that must be imbued, how do you keep your courage up? How do you convince people to tell their stories? Or are they, in fact, afraid to tell their stories?
The risks that the people who tell their stories take are enormous. We only go there, we talk to them, we tell their story, but the risks they take, they could be dead the next day. Their fathers, their sisters, their sons, they could be the next one on the list because there's a watch list that is largely informal, but these are the people who are allegedly drug suspects. So the terror in the urban communities, in the poorest areas, is really terrible. And the drug war does not extend to where I live, for example. I live in Quezon City. The death count is very high, but people do not die where I live. They die in shanty towns. They die in the second-floor bedrooms of a place called Bagbag, where 13 people were killed by the police. So the drug war does not extend where privilege is.
And that's important because that's one of the reasons it's difficult to actually get the true tally, because disasters are taken advantage of in some cases. The death toll is unaccountable because many of the victims are poor in this drug war.
That is possible.
Tell the story of Christine, because this is an extraordinary journalist and an incredibly gifted prose stylist, and the story of Christine is powerful, and we're going to have some photographs.
I guess I'll start with the Once Upon a Time, which is the only good and proper way to begin a story. Once upon a time, there were 6 little children living in a cinder block house in a small village called Payatas in Quezon City. One day, Papa went, so Mama was staying, and then the police came, and they were looking for Papa, except he wasn't home. So they arrested Mama instead, and she was 9 months pregnant and very afraid, but she went anyway. So when Papa came home looking for his wife, they told him to leave, never to come back, because the police might come and take him instead. So he left. He didn't come back for months. Then one morning, Christine, who is 12, the second, she woke up to see Papa at the stove making spaghetti because it was one of the birthdays of the little girls. And then he fed them, and then he sang to them, and then he told them to take care of each other because Papa would have to go. Then all of a sudden there was shouting outside, and the barrels of 3 guns through the window. And the police kicked the door open, and they shoved Papa on the couch, head down, a hand at the back of his neck, his knees to the cushion, and the children were crying, and Papa was saying, "Arrest me instead because my children are so young." So the police said, "Get the children out." And all of them went, crying, screaming, except for one, Christine, 12 years old, who threw herself on top of her father. The police grabbed her by the arm, threw her against the wall, said, "Get out." Except she didn't get out fast enough. She said she was there when they shot her father in the back of his head They shot him once, shot him twice, shot him so close that the next morning her little brother stuck a finger through the couch and pulled out the bullet. And it was many months before Christine started talking again. She said she was sorry. She told her siblings she was sorry. She told her grandmother she was sorry. She said sorry because it was her fault. That had she held onto her father tighter, that had she hugged him harder, her father would still be alive.
Had she hugged him harder?
Of course, in the police report, it said that her father, Crisanto de Juan, a scavenger, had fought back against police and was one of 3 armed scavengers fighting against policemen. There were 30 armed cops, 1 police inspector, and 3 scavengers. The 3 scavengers died. None of the police were injured.
None of the police were injured. And was anyone charged in this killing or any other?
No, not in this killing.
They operate with virtual impunity. And what about the children? What about the family?
Their grandmother is raising the children. As I said, the mother was 9 months pregnant. So now there are 7 children living in a cinder block house in Payatas village, being raised by an old grandmother who does not know how to keep them alive.
It's just a cascading series of horrors, and keeping Christine in mind, that must motivate you. As a journalist, when you're going into these dark areas and telling these dangerous stories, what's the attack on the media, on the press that Duterte has efforted as well?
The president is very sensitive to criticism. The government is sensitive to criticism. Those of us who cover those stories are told we are not patriots, that we are fake news. The government has repeatedly attacked the media publicly. The president himself has said Rappler's fake news is foreign-owned and is controlled by our imperialist lords. You guys in this room.
And the Rappler, we should say, is the website, the
Yes.
extraordinary investigative website you work for.
Rappler has been accused of being CIA-owned. Our license to operate has been suspended. We are in court. Our reporters are no longer allowed to cover the president. We have been charged with cyber libel. We have been accused of tax evasion and foreign ownership. We are not foreign-owned. We do not evade our taxes, and we are not fake news.
But there you have it. The accusations of fake news, the threats of legal violence to shutter speech, and also the president has come up with justifications for killing journalists at times. Is that right?
The Philippines is one of the most dangerous places for journalists. But under this government, it's not necessary to kill a journalist. You have to simply destroy their integrity. However, he did say once that the fact that we are journalists does not mean we are not legitimate targets of assassination.
You get that? The fact that we are journalists does not mean that we are not legitimate.
Yes, I thought it was the fact I was human that meant I was not a legitimate target of assassination. But I'd like to emphasize that I'm not the only reporter covering the night shift. There are many of us. And I'm not the only reporter covering the president. And in fact, a lot of the reporters for Rappler have been threatened with rape, with murder, with many things daily, and are still reporting, and across the country.
And the threat of rape is something that has been sanctioned by this president in some contexts, in a way that is so horrific that I think it bears repeating in the context of soldiers and in his own statement he made about a prison riot.
Well, during his campaign, he gave a lot of speeches in a lot of places, and he spoke about the 1989 riot in some prison in Davao City where he was mayor. And he said that he was there when the riot was over and that a young missionary had been killed, a woman. And he said he looked down at the body and he thought, she's beautiful. She looks like a beautiful American. And he said he was angry. Maybe he was angry at the rape, but mostly he was angry because he got there too late. Because the mayor should have been first.
And he has also said that soldiers, that if they rape once or twice, that's acceptable, but if it's more than that, then
The
maybe
third time is a problem.
It is a horrific caricature, but a reality you are living every day. And what I think is troubling is his popularity at a time when we see the rise of this sort of autocratic populism. And what are the warning signs? Why do you think this is taking hold in a country with a tradition of democracy that has been distorted?
I don't know. The president has an enormous satisfaction rating. He is much loved by the people. It's not so much, you're right, we do have a tradition of human rights, of democracy. It's not so much we don't understand human rights. It's because one day we all decided, or the president did, that some people weren't human.
And that has proven popular.
Yes.
What's the hope you hold on to as a journalist, as a citizen, to push back on that tide? Because it must seem very bleak. He's got another 4 years in office, right?
I don't think I'm the resistance, or journalists are. We're journalists. We're there to tell the story. And I don't think a single story I write has stopped one person being killed. And I need to understand that at this point, nothing is unimaginable. That what we thought was impossible is happening every day, brutalizing families. Because you kill one guy, his whole family is broken. Look at Kirsten. And across the whole country, widows, young women, all of them left behind. They don't just have to break their hearts over a dead husband or a father. The moment a person is killed, they have to worry about burying the body because we're Catholic. So there are bodies in living rooms that they can't bury because they can't afford to. And then they have to raise children. And then they have to worry about the future. And these kids are the same kids like Christine who are spat at because their fathers are drug addicts and it was their fault because they deserved to die. So I'm not sure about hope, but I believe in journalism. And I believe that if we tell the stories, at least we acknowledge that these are people. And we try our damnedest to make people imagine that these are people, not 4,075 or 16,000 or whatever numbers will come out. These are people. His name was Crisanto de Juan. He was a father. He may have been a user. He may not have been, but he was human.
And by telling those stories, journalism matters especially against those kind of odds. And thank you for your courageous work. And this too shall pass if we tell stories like that of Christine. Patricia Evangelista, thank you so much.
How did I get to my success level? I worked myself silly.
Well, I apologize for my success. It's handled.
Are you trying to have it all? That question makes no sense. It's a stupid question. Stop asking it. Don't ask it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks so much for being here. So, well, thank you for that, too. We're here to talk about reinventing the rules to create better work environments for women and hopefully give some helpful advice on how to navigate careers. So we've got an incredible panel, and I'm very excited to talk to all of them. Let me start with Mindy. Mindy Grossman, you're the CEO of Weight Watchers, but this is not your first rodeo. As top dog at a company, you've been out there working almost as long as I have, Mindy, but not quite. Before we start talking about rewriting the rules, talk to me about what the rules were like when you started out in business.
You know, I have to admit that I never prescribed to the fact that there were any rules. And
is that the secret to your success in a way?
You know, it actually has been, which is why I've never been afraid to take risk. But it's really important to note that I established my own rules. And I've used that as a purpose filter throughout my career. and I've never compromised my values. And I've created my own mantra of passion, purpose, and impact, and that's what I've followed. So if I was in an environment, I actually removed myself from environments. And I took those risks because I knew that if I followed that internally, that would be the right thing no matter what happened. And I believe in that to this day. Now, that's not to say there are horrific things happening everywhere, and not everybody can make the same choices.
I was going to say, that's a luxury, isn't it, to be able to leave?
But you know, I left when I had no money. I left a job with no other job when I had a small child, and I came home and I said, I'm leaving the next day because the values of this company does not align with who I am. And even though I'm doing well, if I sit here and watch this, I'm contributing to this. And I left, and I remember standing on Park Avenue going, what did I just do? But I knew I did the right thing. And the next day, Ralph Lauren called me and said, I'm sorry you left, but you're going to come work for us.
Can you tell me which company you left?
It was Warnaco, and actually it was run by a woman, which is interesting. So again, it's a matter of knowing what risk you're able to take at any given point in your life. But the powerful thing for me now, to be able to have a platform to create change for others, I find incredibly empowering and important. I've been talking about diversity and inclusion for half of my career. And to be talking about it today, again, is infuriating. And that's why we've just got to keep giving that message.
And we'll be talking about that more in a moment. My favorite sign at the Women's March is the older woman saying, with the sign that said, I can't believe I'm still protesting this shit. But anyway, Layla Hote, you're one of the few top female businesswomen in the Middle East as partner and managing director of the Boston Consulting Group. What unique challenges have you faced growing up and doing business in the Middle East?
Okay, so growing up in Lebanon, I mean, was great, obviously, but the expectation, the societal expectation, at least at my generation, for women were you get married. Success is if you get married, you have a nice family, etc. So I remember at 18 talking to my classmates, you know, what are you going to go to, where are you going to go to university, what are you going to do next? And it was more the questions from the girls, do you have a suitor, are you going to get married soon or after university?
I think you have to speak louder.
After university, thank you. And so my parents really encouraged us to pursue our education, both my sister and I. And I was one of the very few girls that I knew who left home at 18 to pursue my education abroad. And I think that helped in setting the stage moving forward. I studied and worked abroad and then came back to work in the Middle East. And there I faced quite a lot of challenges, as you can expect. In my TED Talk, I speak about one example where, you know, quite advanced in my career, as I was hoping to make partner, I get my boss suddenly telling me, in a heated moment, you know, you're a very bad role model for all these young women because once a woman gets married and has kids, her role is to stay, her place is in the home. So what are you doing? And that was like a moment of truth. Where do I go from there? I had other examples where I had agreed with my superior that I would present the work to the client, and I get there, and we go there, and he starts to present and goes through the whole presentation. And then at the end, I'm like, whatever your name, I thought we agreed that, you know, I was going to present this work. And he said, but you're too pretty. Didn't you see there were 7 guys there? They would never have been able to concentrate on what you're saying. And when I got pissed off and I said, you know, we're not at a bar. You're not picking me up. So what the hell are you doing? Why are you getting upset? Any other girl would take this as a compliment. So these were the kinds of things that you just face and that, you know, are common. And so you just have to, I think one of the key rules is really build a very deep belief that you're going to make it and never let anyone touch that belief. You know, I'm going to make it and I'm going to be an amazing mother and have a fulfilling career.
And I know your father really helped kind of give you that confidence because he had 2 daughters.
Yes.
And yet he really instilled in you the importance of education and getting out there and, you know, showing your stuff.
Absolutely, yes. So having that deep belief, building that deep belief, which I think my parents, both my father and my mother, have helped a lot in building, but then protecting it against everything, against corporate culture, against societal pressure, against all odds, and being flexible to change along the way, but continue to go to the mountaintop and not waver. I think that's the key.
fathers are so important, I think, when it comes to shaping, you know, what our potential is. And Diane, I know we recently sat down at your offices to record my podcast for part of our Wonder Women series, shameless plug. And we talked a little bit about rule breaking and rule making and rule changing when necessary. And I think it's been so inspiring for me to watch you kind of adjust to circumstances and kind of turn left or turn right as, you know, the environment demands. So give us a couple of examples of how there were moments in your career when you had to reassess and recalibrate.
You know, I write my diary, which is actually very boring, but I've written my diary all my life. And any page I open of any year, I am always been at a turning point. So it looks, I mean, I always say I'm at a turning point. So it looks like all my life, all I did was turn.
Every day is a turning point.
So every day is a turning point. So anyway, I am much older than all of you, so I've had a long life, and I've had different moments. I started as a very, very young girl, and I lived an American dream, right? So I am one of you, you know, a young, blah, blah, blah. And then it went all the way, and then I sold it, I went, da, 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 da. And then 20 years ago, I started again. And again, as a startup, I was 50. I thought I was again 25. And I started, and I went up all the way. And now strangely, by now you know how old I am, since you calculated. And now is another time, because now is the legacy. And also because now we live in such a disruptive world. So all the industries are disrupted. And everything is disrupted. And so you have to kind of shrink before you can, if you really want to jump into the new way, you have to kind of shrink and reevaluate. So and funny enough, when people ask me, okay, so, you know, people always ask you, if you knew then what you know now, what would you be different? And I hated that question, because I never had an answer. But now I do have an answer. The truth is, I never did a business plan. And I mean, I've had, 40 plus years around, and truly, my first real business plan is now. So what on?
Never too late. Krista, you're the CEO of OpenTable, and you reinvented your career from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. It must have been wonderful to be in two environments that are so receptive and hospitable to women. But no, seriously, what are some of the unique challenges you faced working in those two sectors?
Yeah, so when I started on Wall Street, just to give you some perspective, they had just outlawed strippers on the trading floor a couple years back. And I'm not as strong as Mindy, because I did forsake my values, actually. I showed up and I looked around and I was like, I guess this is the game on the field. I got to go play this game. And if that meant showing up and swearing like a sailor, or laughing at jokes that were definitely inappropriate, I did it. And one of the things that I realized now looking back is I showed up as a man to be accepted by men. And as I think about transforming the culture at OpenTable, I mean, sometimes your best lessons are the ones that you see something horrible going on. It was literally like, I can never do that. So yes, then I go from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. And what's interesting about Silicon Valley is that there's this, we're so progressive. We're so, we're changing the world. And yet, the sexism is almost more insidious because it's less overt. And so the covert sexism, you show up to work sometimes and you're like, am I crazy? Like, is this happening right now? And so you look at all these things that go on around you, and then you get into a leadership role and you say, it's not just that I can change the rules, I must
So how do
change
you
the
do
rules.
that?
If I can just
Sure.
jump in. I think this is an extremely important point. I think the most dangerous, I mean, today we've moved a lot forward, but, and very few people will be very overt about them being against women empowerment or women equity. But the most dangerous ones are those passive-aggressive, because they will say things like, oh, I'm so all for equality, I so want, I think everything should be fair, but she really needs to make sure that she first takes care of her kids and that she's home for them. And then if she has the time, then she can be a partner if she wants. But I'm going to judge her if she's not at home with her kids. What are you saying?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's these sort of death by a thousand cuts, this insidious sexism that kind of keeps women out of the conversation and isn't an inclusive environment, and just sort of, as you say, passive-aggressive. I could write a book about this. But tell me what you do to combat that and how you're changing the culture at Open Table.
Yeah, so first it starts at the top end of the funnel, and we have to look at, say, who are we bringing into the organization? I've worked in very male-dominated environments, and actually I remember I just started at the Walt Disney Company, and actually it was the first meeting ever where there were actually more women than men in the room, and it was this really weird experience for me, because what I noticed in that moment is when it was half women, all that stuff just kind of fell away. And so I became just determined to say, we're going to get to half women. We're going to get to an environment where the leadership and every step down the chain. So we start at the top and we say, okay, who are we bringing in? And I started doing research. For example, I started requiring that we have at least 2 women on every panel. Because what I learned is that if you just have one woman, her odds of getting hired are next to 0. Because she is now the diversity candidate and not the candidate. And so looking at every step along the way, and then also just talking about it. Like I talk about my own experiences and failures, and my God, I talk about things like, I feel like I should write a book about tales from breastfeeding and pumping. Like, just this stuff is hard, but let's normalize it. Let's recognize that this isn't some strange thing that happens. We all have to blend our lives together, and you have to come in. And it is hard, but let's talk about it. Let's not pretend like this is some sort of strange thing that women are now leading in the workforce.
And what kind of things are you doing,
But sometimes you do have to force the structure. So when I got to Nike in 2000, Phil Knight had just come in, put a new executive team together. I was the first person to be hired from the outside to run the global apparel business and the most senior woman in the company. And he came to me and he goes, why are we losing all these women? And by the way, I'm kind of devastated what's going on there now. But so we brought in Catalyst. We did an inclusion survey across the company, created the first Women's Leadership Council, because in a lot of these big global companies, if there aren't enough women, they feel isolated.
That's right.
So having them be able to have a connection and bringing them together, because if you're the only woman in Japan, who are you going to talk to? And then the second thing that was really important, you could not fill an open position unless 50% of the qualified candidate pool was diverse. And you had to identify why you hired the person you did. And let me tell you, that makes a difference, as well as in people's performance review, the diversity of their succession has to be part of that review. Things change when things like that happen.
Right, instituting clear-cut policies that require accountability and transparency are critical. And Layla, I know...
And that's why I say, I feel like it's not a man's issue, it's not a woman's issue, it's a leadership issue.
Absolutely.
And really quickly, if a leader stands up and says, this is important, you can't believe how quickly change can happen.
And there's also something I was just going to say called the Rooney Rule. So I did these hours for Nat Geo, and one is on gender inequality in Hollywood and Silicon Valley. And this one woman said they increased sort of their female presence by 75% by incorporating something called the Rooney Rule, named after the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, as an effort by the NFL to have more diversity in coaching and management positions. You're required to interview a minority or female candidate for every job opening. And her point is, how can we hire people if we don't even interview them? So you obviously have to bring people into the pipeline, but really, strong policies like that can change things dramatically. And Layla, I know that you've studied a lot, like how to bring more women up, how to get them more integrated into companies and in leadership positions.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important thing?
I mean, there are so many things that are important, but I would say, and I lead the women at BCG for the region, for Europe and the Middle East. I would say the three things that I think are critical. Number one is flexibility. I mean, I would never have made it where I am if I didn't manage to rewrite the rules and say, listen, at 7 o'clock, if I'm not traveling, I'm going to be home with my kids. I'm going to spend an hour and a half. I'm going to put them to bed. Nobody calls me. I block that time in my calendar. And then I'll work. I know it's very long hours in consulting. I'll work till 1 a.m. I'll take your calls and everything. But this time is sacred. Traveling. You know, all my colleagues, my male peers might spend 4 days a week in Saudi. All my clients are in Saudi. I go there 2 days a week. I put all my meetings there, and I make it work. As long as I am as commercially successful as you are, you know, then so the flexibility I think is critical, and we need to make it tailored. So for some women, it's about, if they're traveling a lot, it's about having a nanny here and a nanny in the other location. For some leaders, everyone needs a different solution, and we need to think together to make that solution possible for her. The second thing is sponsorship. So we talk a lot about mentorship, but sponsorship, you know, having somebody who has your back, who puts the spotlight on you, who really says, this is extremely important and had a critical impact in my career. The problem, as I'm sure a lot of you might know, is that males are in power, so they need to be the sponsors. And you tend to sponsor people who are more similar to you, so you tend to sponsor males more than women. But also, some senior males might be worried about the association. You know, why does he like Layla so much? Why is he always saying such good things about her? So, you know, we need to push, we need to encourage, incentivize, and really, shine the spotlight on those great men who are willing to be sponsored.
I know that you had a bad mentor, and Layla came up with sort of a mantra, which I'm going to make into a bumper sticker: convert shit into fuel. I like that. And Diane, I know that obviously throughout the course of your career...
I have done a lot of that.
But you obviously have mentored so many women. I think that when we talk about making a workplace more hospitable to women and minorities and making them more diverse and inclusive, mentorship is so critically important. But I think some people don't know how to be a good mentor. So what advice would you give for that?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, truth is always, truth. I mean, you have the best gift you can give anyone is making them understand that the strength comes from themselves. I mean, you have to learn how to push that button inside them, because that's where the strength is, I always say the most important relationship in life is the one you have with yourself. And that is, at the end, and we have a tendency, women, we every now and then, we are strong. We are much stronger. And when there's a tragedy, it's always the women who save it and who solve everything. But other than that, when things are good, we have a tendency to say, oh, you don't want to show it, or, you want the man to feel good. All of that is good. But the important thing is that if inside you always know, by the way, I'm talking, don't think that I don't wake up often and think I'm a loser, because I do. And we all do, so it's, but then when I do feel like a loser, this is what I say to myself, and I say it loud: when you doubt your power, you give power to your doubts.
Yeah. That's true. And Krista, I mean, I'd like, how, it's interesting, because I think people may look at this panel and think, well, I'm sure they wake up in the morning and like, I'm the bomb. And it's so interesting that we all have crises of confidence. And so how do you kind of prop yourself up? Because it is interesting that men, when they don't succeed, they blame everybody else. And when women don't succeed, they blame themselves, which is true. And so how do you deal with the confidence gap and kind of get out there and say, I'm going to crush it?
Well, I mean, you're better together than you are alone. And so that's, for me, it's tapping into my sisterhood. And when I say sisterhood, I mean that in very broad terms. I actually have 4 sisters, so I literally tap into my sisterhood.
That must have been a fun house growing up.
I know.
So 5 girls?
5 girls and 2 boys.
Yikes.
Chaos. Which is, where you learn to, not worry too much about what people say. But it's truly like, it's like being vulnerable with a girlfriend, or frankly, I have a lot of other female CEOs that I get to tap into, or female venture capitalists. And it's like, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. I'm not really sure how to handle it. And it's an exchange. And we're not so precious about, being perfect, or God forbid, I don't care if anyone judges me, but I need that network. I need to be able to reach out because, every day I'm surprised actually to hear that you ever, now I'm inspired.
No, but it's so critical to have that authentic network that allows you to be vulnerable.
That's right.
Because you get to a certain position, it's very hard to be that vulnerable, externally. And then who do you talk to, right? So to have that network that you trust and support, and you can just say whatever and no one's judging you,
your safe
critical.
Space. And so, we're almost out of time. I can't believe it. It went by so quickly. But for everyone in the audience who admires all of you deeply and one day would like to have a job like each of you, what advice would you give, like sort of the top rule for women out there who would like to follow in your footsteps?
I'm happy to jump in first. So I'd give 2 pieces of advice. The first one you hear all the time on the airplane, the security guidelines. I'm sure you've heard it. Put your oxygen mask first before assisting others. And I think it's really important because
That's a good one.
It's so demanding to have to be, to manage your family and a very demanding career that you're going to run out of steam. If you just keep pushing yourself and don't listen to your body and don't stop, you're just going to run out of steam, and then you're no help to anyone. So that's rule number 1. The second rule I would say is about having kids and when to have kids. So if you decide to have kids, which is a very personal choice, I would say don't care about when the next promotion is. You have the kid when you feel personally ready for it, and then everything will sort itself out. So
I would say the most important thing you need to realize is the transformational power of believing in yourself. Because how are you going to get others to believe if you don't have that power internally? And it's just so critical. But at the same time, you have to have acute self-awareness of your impact on others. And it's the combination of those 2 things that I think are really important.
And I would say, when you own your vulnerability, you become the most powerful person in the room because you own the narrative of whatever thing that, potentially holds you back. Some of it is the self-awareness associated with it. But it took until my 40s to really recognize that paradox because I was so afraid of, oh, I'm not perfect, or you're not going to see. And it's like, no, this part, I got some work to do. But I'm telling you how I'm going to rewrite that rule and how I'm going to achieve as a result.
So we are 0, and I feel that I've already answered about that. But I would like to say one thing that is very important. As us women now are feeling, and hopefully we are not putting the lid back and we speak, I think we have to spend a lot of time thinking about how we are raising our sons. I think that women have the future in their hands with the children. And how we raise our sons is so important to how they will behave 20 years from now.
And in fact, I know we're out of time, but you all have been heartened, I know all of you, by millennial men. And I know that a lot of us feel like they've gotten a bad rap, or perhaps they have gotten a bad rap as sort of these hoodies, guys running around in hoodies that are surprisingly unenlightened given the fact that they come from working women, most of them, right? But you guys say that you've been inspired by them. And so just quickly tell us why.
I'm just, when I watch a man take paternity leave, again, it destigmatizes their desire to be a parent, or that you're taking time to be with your child. And I think there's something really strong, remarkable, because if everybody can spend time raising our children with love and belief, what is possible for this world?
Yeah. I think the research at BCG, we've done some research on millennial men, and what we found is that there really is a generational mind shift. So they really truly believe in diversity, and they want to have more of a caretaking role themselves. So leveraging those men in your diversity approach, in looking for flexible policies, I think is critical for companies.
And Mindy, you've seen that throughout your career with a great husband who shares equally.
And I've had that incredible support. I commuted between New York and Portland, Oregon, and was out of the country 30% of the time for 6 years. So if you didn't have that support. But what I'm seeing today when I look at Weight Watchers, and I would say we're an incredibly inclusive organization, a purpose-driven organization, but it is as important to the men that they take their paternity leave, and it sets an example for the organization. They care as much about being healthy for the future of their children, which used to always fall on the women. So there is a change, and that's really inspiring to see.
Well, that's a nice, hopeful note to end things on. Diane, Krista, Layla, and Mindy, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
I love solving problems, especially big social problems. Every morning I wake up and I get to try and make the world a better place. And we're connecting families that used to never be able to connect.
In the caves above the forests, the bears were settling down.
Caribou is an education platform that helps parents, extended family, and mentors read and draw with children when they're not in the same location. So we like to say we're FaceTime meets Kindle for kids.
Summoning up all his courage, he took a deep breath and stepped inside.
Here's how easy it is to use Caribou. All you have to do is call your contact, and then as soon as they answer, you're in a real live video chat. So you can pick out a book, and everyone can see what's happening on both sides of the screen. Every time I turn a page, whoever's on the other side is seeing me turn the page. Kids love turning the page because it looks like a real page. The books are focused on ages 0 to 7. There are hundreds of books to choose from in 6 different languages and educational workbooks that you can draw on. That's how easy it is to use Caribou. For children to be ready for kindergarten, they have to be read to for at least 20 minutes a day. If you think about how many parents travel for work or work late or are gone because they're deployed, there's just so many reasons why someone wouldn't be able to get that time in. And so we're really excited that Caribou's technology has finally kind of created the opportunity for kids to be read to, no matter where the adult is. Not only is that building a connection with the child, you're building incredible, unique moments.
His parents would nag and tell him to roar.
To be named a Toyota Mother of Invention, to be recognized for inventing something that's really solving a problem is just such an extreme honor. There's a lot of people that made Caribou what it is today, and I'm grateful to them, but very excited that the team is being represented by a woman and a Latina. My hope and dream for Caribou is that we become a household name for communication between families when they're far away. When people say, oh, let's FaceTime, I hope in the future it's let's Caribou.
I'm ready to Caribou. Yeah. You ready to Caribou? Hello, everyone. I'm Sade Better-and-Wall from WABC TV, and thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and certainly here with you, Max Tuckman from Caribou. You know, Max, this is such great technology for families who are apart. So, what was the genesis for this? How'd you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so Caribou was born from us looking at a photo of a soldier trying to read a hardcover book to his daughter through a webcam. Right? It breaks your heart. It is like this man is out there possibly giving his life to keep our family safe, and this is the best technology we have for him to stay connected to his family in an engaging way. And we were like, full stop, not okay. So we built the technology where you could have an interactive video call, you could have a shared screen, the child and the adult, whether it be a grandparent or a mentor or a parent, can read and draw with the child in a live video call.
And our lives have gotten so much busier these days, you know, and you've got divorced parents who are out there or parents who are traveling. So this is really essential in maintaining that connection with your child.
Absolutely, and kids need to be read to for a minimum of 20 minutes a day. Or they won't be on track for school. So it's incredibly important that kids are getting that important literacy diet. But like you said, there's hundreds of millions of families that are out there separated by distance, stay connected through tablets or mobile phones, and needed something better.
So why is education so important to you, and certainly the military?
Yeah. So I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors and the daughter of Cuban immigrants. I'm a Jubin.
A Jubin, I like that.
I'm bringing that to New York. Miami, it's like totally normal. Here, people are like, what is that? And when you flee so many countries, your family kind of really pounds into you that education is the only thing you can take with you when you flee a country. You can sew silverware into your coats, and that's about it. And so growing up, my parents never went to college. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. And they never got that opportunity. And even my opportunity was different because my family hadn't gone through that process. And so, education has always been a very personal experience of something that I felt like I struggled with as a minority, as someone growing up. And but then I was a Teach for America teacher in a low-income community in Miami, and that's when I truly saw my 12th graders who were reading on a 5th grade reading level, and I was like, I thought my situation, I was upset about my situation, then I was like, this is just so much worse. And when you really start peeling back the onion and figuring out where that all starts, it's early childhood literacy. It's between the ages of truly 0 and 3, and we focus on 0 to 7.
Which is why this is so important, this technology.
Extremely important.
As a female, as a minority, we're always talking about sort of the hardships that one will go through, but what are all the positive experiences that you've had?
Oh my gosh, it is great to be a woman right now. I know everyone keeps saying it's the year of the woman. It's the millennium of the woman. We are not going away in 365 days, or at least I'm not. And I just power is like matter. It is neither created nor destroyed, it is redistributed. And we are coming for the power. And so being a woman right now is amazing in this space.
I can hear your roar.
Spaces.
Yeah. Okay, you said before, and I'm a big believer in this, and really giving back to your community. Why is giving back, do you feel that it's your responsibility? Where'd that come from?
Absolutely. When your family has gone through so much to bring you here to this country, so that you can grow up and do the things that you want to do and not be persecuted for your beliefs, you tend to respect our U.S. Armed Forces in such a different way. And again, because we were kind of born from, seeing this very, very sad photo, and then again, my just personal belief and respect for the U.S. military, we've decided to donate free subscriptions of Caribou to every currently serving military member in the U.S.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you.
Now, I also understand that you are spearheading an organization called Binders of Women. Tell us about that.
Yes. So it's a secret group that apparently is not secret anymore.
Not so secret anymore.
But we're called BFAL, Binders Full of Women, in Miami, because a couple years ago, as a female founder in the tech system, I was like, what is happening? I cannot deal with these manels. These all male panels. It is literally statistically impossible to only have men on stage. And yet it's happening everywhere. Literally they can't find a woman to talk about blockchain or cryptocurrency or tech. And so I was just like, well, I've got to take this into my own hands. And so we've created a literal binder full of women. So every time there's a panel or a conference or some kind of award that's coming up in Miami.
It's here you go.
We're
check out the
we've
binder.
made it easy for you.
Great. Now, I know this is really going to be a huge year for Caribou, 2018, which is really exciting. You've partnered with Blue Star Families, which works with 150,000 military families. That's fantastic. And you're also working with Sesame Street. So what's next for the company?
Global domination.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it. All right. Okay, we're talking about, women now. So what message do you really have for women at this point? Certainly when they're thinking about a startup and they've got this idea, how do you get it out there? What do you need to do?
I'm always bothered by the research that shows that when a woman is looking at a job description, she looks at it and she says, oh, I'm only 80% qualified for that, and so I'm just gonna bow out, lean out. And then a man looks at the same thing and he says, I'm 20% qualified, and he's like, psh, I got this, I could be CEO. Mm-hmm. So I try to live my life with the confidence of a mediocre white man, because I feel like I can just conquer the world.
Don't you love her?
And so when you have the confidence of a mediocre white man, you just like wake up and you're like, let's do this.
Hey, let's do it. I got it. The world is mine.
and I think more women should think like that, right? Like, so I got a dog. That's my fur baby. And there's never a good time to get a dog. There's never a good time to have a child, right? There's never a good time to get married. Like, there's always something that's going to complicate it. And I think we lean out of these things before we should. And so my like charge for all the women in this room is to please, if you are passionate about something, just go do it.
Go do it. And one thing that we also talked about, besides just doing it, really having that network of people around you, finding sponsorship, which they actually talked about in the last segment. How did that play for you?
I've had some incredible mentors in my life, women and men. The women were obviously awesome, and but what I realized later was that they weren't actually just mentors. I feel like mentors are kind of assigned to you, and you're like forced, like your mentor is like forced to deal with you. Sponsors would take a bullet for you. They will open doors. They will make the introductions. They will put their name on your name. That's what all women should have. And I know that has been a big reason why I've been successful.
Well, we are so excited for your success down the road. Everyone, please give a round of applause. Max Suckman for Caribou. Check out the app. Thank you so much. And right now we're going to actually take a really short break, and we encourage all of you to get back here at 11:15 sharp. We're going to continue with our next segment. We're going to have Sally Yates on the White House crisis, three master chefs, and much more. So thank you again. Thanks for joining us. Wonderful, Max. Great. You did great.
Mom and Dad saw the foundation as a way to teach us how to give.
I love the story that's unfolding here.
We can quantify it in a lot of ways, but it's really hearing the stories from individuals that makes me most proud.
It's so important for leaving a world that's better than it is now.
My grandmom had this great quote, "It's not what you gather in life.
It's what you scatter in life that tells the kind of life you have lived."
Welcome back to the 9th Annual Women in the World Summit. The program is about to resume. As a reminder, please silence all electronic devices. Flash photography is not permitted in the theater. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next session, where we're going to be talking about a topic that some of us love to hate, some of us hate to love, but we all need, and that is money. Because there's something very odd about what's going on with feminism today. In lots of areas of our life, women have been getting more and more powerful, making real strides in terms of how they take control of the workplace, the wider public sphere, their own homes, their houses, etc., etc. But when it comes to money, there's something of a big lag. Very strange, very important, very challenging for all of us. And we have a great panel of people to talk about this. We have next to me Paula Polito, who's Global Client Strategy Officer at UBS, who is going to be talking to us about how women handle their money. We've got Laura Wasser, who is a family law attorney in Hollywood, who's been handling the divorces of people like Angelina Jolie. And we have Carmen Rita Wong, who's a CEO of founder of Malecon Productions, a behavioral economist, and somebody who's been a financial journalist for years. But I'd like to start with you, Paula, because you've been doing a study recently at UBS, which looks at what women are actually doing with their money. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, you know, this is an age-old problem. We've been talking about women abdicating their financial futures for so long, and I actually think it's time to really understand the why. And there's a couple of things that I think are very important. There are two large trends that are happening for women. One is, we all know women are living longer, and they're outliving their spouse. And the second thing is divorce rates are on the rise, and Laura can talk about that in spades. And
it's what makes her money.
And actually, the graying divorce population, women 50 and older, that's on the rise. And so when you think about it, these two trends are affecting 8 out of 10 women will wind up being alone and financially need a financial wherewithal to help themselves, 8 out of 10 women.
So all of you in the audience, look around your row, and you can work out that 8 out of 10 of you are going to be on your own at some point.
So the truth is that you have this trend, right?
You can try and work out who's not going to be on their own. They're in the minority.
We faced this trend, and we started to interview women that were widowed and divorced. And we said, what would you do differently? And 60% of the women said, we wish we would have done something differently while we were married. We should have taken more control. We should have empowered ourselves more. We should have educated ourselves more. And basically, 98% of widows and divorcees said, I want to give advice to other women because they need to hear. We need to create a community. So that was the widows. On the divorce side, 60% of women are, just saying, I wish I would have done something differently again. And then we interviewed married women, which was absolutely fascinating. And we said, why do you continue to abdicate? Because almost 60% of women abdicate. So this notion of, I wish I did something different, and trying to get people to actually do more and stop abdicating. Now, what I find really interesting, Jillian, is that there are a few reasons why women abdicate. One is historical, second is societal, and three is they just don't have the confidence or the competence, unless they actually don't believe they do, and they actually do.
Right.
But I think the historical piece is interesting because if you look back 60 years since women have really made progress in terms of enabling themselves when it comes to financial well-being, I remember my mother having to have my father sign to get a line of credit when she was doing some real estate with her brothers and sisters. That wasn't so long ago. I was in high school. When you think about the societal piece, which is really interesting, women do want to be taken care of, and men want to take care of women as well. So you've got this societal thing going on. And last but not least, you have sort of this competence bias, you have confidence issues, and women just feel, I think, inadequate sometimes. And it's not because they can't be confident, it's that they need to be shown how to be confident.
Well, I think that's a great point. It's one of the reasons I'm so pleased we're talking about this morning, because I must say, in my own life, I grew up in a household where my father did everything, my mother didn't have any involvement in finance, and so I basically imbued this kind of Prince Charming idea that somehow some guy was going to ride to the rescue and pay for everything. And life has been a shock. I'm now separated, and I've had to learn the hard way. But Carmen, my story is not unusual, is it?
No, I'm here because of abdication, really. Partially because I grew up in a household watching my mother, who, by the way, fled a revolution, Dominicana, Latina. She had 6 children. I'm the oldest of 5 girls. And I watched our father hand a check to her every week for all of her expenses, the household expenses. And in that moment, in that transfer of power, it wasn't so much the power. I didn't judge her. I didn't think she was less than. But what I saw was, it doesn't matter where you get your money. If you have 6 kids and you need to stay home, stay home. But here's what really shocked me. 2 things. One, he handed the check. Silence. No dialogue. No conversation. No questioning, right? And then we're talking about emotions and money. Resignation. The resignation on her face, in the fact that she was a very intelligent, vibrant woman who was in this position, who, by the way, then raised me as a raging feminist, but really, sit there and took the position that she was in and had to take it, but she made sure her children didn't. But to your point about, access to tools too, in our lifetime, in my lifetime, women couldn't have credit cards. So one of the things that we need to do, we see my mother's position, we see ourselves now, is that now our emotions and our psychology and our motivation has to keep up and catch up with the fact that we have access to all the same tools, all the same information as the men do, and all the same markets. So we need to catch up with that.
And I think you raise a great point there, because I think the reality is, girlfriends, that actually these days it's often easier to talk about sex than it is to talk about money with our friends.
Absolutely.
How many of you have sat around and had a heart-to-heart with your friends about what's going on inside your bank account? Scary.
I do, but...
Laura, you see the fallout of this. How often do you see women coming into the office who seem to have been empowered, but actually turn up and say, I have no idea what's happening in our finances?
Very often. It happens all the time. I work in Southern California. We have a lot of entertainment industry families, and these women who have been, Mrs. Studio Head or Mrs. Executive Producer or Mrs. Movie Star, every restaurant is open to them, every Neiman Marcus, every department store, and yet when they come in, they say, I don't even have a credit card that's in my own name, I just use his. Or I have no access to our bank accounts because our money managers have always done these. These are wealthy, sophisticated women. And then we have the flip side, which is happening quite a bit more these days, which is women who are actually the earning spouses. And as Paula said, they've let somebody else take care of their finances, particularly if their spouse is a stay-home dad. Oftentimes he will say, well, let me take care of that. And so they don't even know what's going on. So in both situations, as we've seen, there is a lack of communication, lack of talking about it, and that lack of communication, not only amongst us as women with friends, but with our partners and spouses, causes a huge problem, which is something I think as women we have to avoid in our relationships. As early as the time you move in with somebody, I think it's important to start having those not very sexy conversations, but it is interesting that this is a topic that's so uncomfortable for so many of us.
I mean, do you tell people to basically start talking about this up front before or early on in dating? I mean,
yes. I don't know how so much in dating, but again, these days, the way we date, you meet online, so you may not know exactly somebody's background, down to the who pays for that first dinner. But I do talk to people all the time, speak to many groups of women about prenuptial agreements, for example. And again, even if you aren't in a situation where a prenuptial agreement is right for you and your fiance because the law doesn't necessitate it or there's not enough money, have the conversations that you would be having if you were going to be having a prenuptial agreement. Hey, I'm 35. I don't ever want to sleep on a futon again. If we go to New York to travel, let's stay at a hotel. Or, hey, what time were you thinking that we might want to be retiring? How much should we put aside for our kids' education? When my older parents come to live with us because they can't live alone, are they going to be living with us or are they going to be living in some kind of an assisted living? Those are the conversations, again, not at all sexy, but certainly worth having, and they wouldn't be in a prenuptial agreement. A prenuptial agreement is this is what I earn and I'd like to keep it separate. You may not need that, but you do, I think, need to have conversations about finances so that you can be on the same page when you enter into what is an agreement to live together, to get married, to have children. Those are important topics to discuss.
So, I mean, Carmen or Paula, do you see the younger generation doing that more now? I mean, clearly the older generation, people like myself have been very slow to this game, but are we seeing any change of attitudes?
I mean, I'm seeing some, but when I do a lot of speaking around the country and I speak a lot to young women, I still see and hear a lot of, it's our money now. You've heard this one so many times, especially when you get married. It's our money now, and I'm on fire. Flames are coming out of my head. And then it's, no, I'm not anti-coupling up or love or relationships, but, let's be clear, though I have been divorced twice.
That shows you're optimistic. You keep trying.
Hey, you can't be good at everything, okay? But you have to really understand your own autonomy. I think what I see is a psychology and an emotional state where we seem to have been brought up to internalize the idea that our gender has no business in the business, that we are just not there. And it's something that I see, as a woman of color, I see this in other realms of my life too, that this is not our place, that you shouldn't be putting yourself there. Girls, stick to what you do. So we need to stop internalizing that. This is not genetic, the idea that you can be in the markets or not in the markets, or you can't manage the money. What I would love to see is if you say, well, this is now our money. You need to have your money, and you need to know where all that money is going. And one of the things we have to realize is that we fight for so many things in equality. This is equality. Those conversations. That's all about equality.
And
money is
Carmen,
power.
What I find is that in the study, and what's shocking to me, because I made my team go back and look at the data 10 times, is that millennial women are abdicating more than any other generation, which is shocking.
Really?
It's shocking.
So you mean millennial women are basically saying, I'm going to let my Prince Charming...
I'm going to abdicate. Now, I don't think it's so much the Prince Charming. It could be various reasons why people abdicate. It could be the fact that they saw their mother do it. There's a lot of reasons why. It's not so much Prince Charming, but it is a phenomenon. It is happening. And I think that we have to break the cycle. Women have to realize that they have to do it themselves. They can delegate to a financial services person, they can delegate to their accountant or their attorney, but the truth is you still have to know certain things. And I think that financial wherewithal, people get a little bit confused about it, and I like what Laura said, because it's not just the market, the risk tolerance, your asset allocation. Katie Couric and I were talking backstage, she says her eyes glaze over for that, and I understand that. But what I think is really important is understanding your broader financial life, which is how much money can I spend? What's my debt? How much do I need to retire? If I might live to be 100 as a female, do I have long-term care? You know, what about my charities and philanthropy and my taxes? I mean, it's a much bigger picture than just the market. And that's what's critical, because that's what women have to empower themselves to see the big picture. And that's really what financial empowerment and financial services, we need to get to that conversation, not to the markets going up and down today. Oh my God, we got volatility. Well, guess what? Volatility is here to stay. It's always going to be there. We're always going to watch the markets go up and down. But you need the peace of mind, because it's much broader than investments. And that's the message that women need to hear.
Yeah, this is so important because, you know, I didn't get into personal finance because Roth IRAs are riveting. I got into it because I, you know, watched my dad, you know, with the little money that we had saved up in retirement, you know, watch Wall Street Week and look at stocks. And I said, well, this is interesting, and it's unintimidating because I just hung around and paid attention. But I'll tell you this, you know, when you say bigger than the markets, what I realized at a very young age, and why when I got into it, I was on fire about it, was because money and how you manage your money changes your life completely. It's one of the biggest powers you have. It's like food, water, sleep, sex, money. That's it. So we need to pay it. We need
came before money.
Right?
Well, money can be sexy.
Right, but you need to pay attention because it affects every part of your life, whether it's divorce or relationships or parents, you know, and dealing with your family. When you educate women in your family, when you leave here and when you have this knowledge, you can infect your whole family. You can change that whole ecosystem. Mm-hmm. You know, my mother was very proud, and she didn't speak to us about her money or finances or a lot of other things, or her health, right? She's very old school. She didn't tell us that she lost her health insurance. She didn't tell us that she didn't feel well. Next thing you know, she's in the emergency room, stage 4 colon cancer. And I said, Mom, why didn't you go to the doctor? Why didn't you do something? I didn't have health insurance. I didn't have the money. 6 children. Don't you think we would have done that? Not money affects every single point of your life. You have to take control of it. You have to pay attention. Your lives depend on it.
Yeah, well, that's a...
Absolutely.
That's a great, teachable, very tragic story, which I think we should all be taking to heart. And I often think that, you know, if young women are willing to check what's in the food they put in their mouths, if they're willing to go to the doctor and have mammograms, they should be looking at money in the same way. You know, if you care enough about your food, you should care enough about your money as well. But I'm curious, Laura, you know, going back to what happens when it all goes horribly wrong. You know, you have some glitzy, glamorous woman walking into your office who looks like she has it all. And you have had an amazing roster of clients from, you know, Angelina Jolie, Kim Kardashian, and so on. She turns around and says, you know, I've got no idea what's happening with my money. What do you do next? And how do you even pay for a divorce if you haven't got control of your money? Because, you know, you're not cheap, are you? You're charging, what, $25,000 a retainer, you know?
Well, okay, one of the actual pluses about getting divorced, and there may be a few, but when it does go horribly wrong, one thing that I do believe both parties end up learning about is their finances. You have to, because the state of California, at least where I practice, insists that you exchange information that you've signed under penalty of perjury about what you earn, what you spend, what you have, and what you owe. And so, and that happens on every level. People say to me, well, what's different about these glitzy celebrity divorces than the normal people? So we created a website this year called it'sovereasy.com that anybody can use and go on. And
that's a great name. It's over easy.
Thank you. But those are the 4 components of what you really need to do. And again, custody comes first when you're talking about children, and there's other things in terms of dividing up the estate. But you need to put into that program or discuss with your attorney what you have, what you owe, what you earn, and what you spend. And some people don't really even realize how much they spend. And I say, look, it's not going to be fun, but this will be interesting. For the next month, everything you spend, whether it's valet parking, to tipping the manicurist, to your mortgage, your homeowner's insurance, write it all down. We'll go through your credit card bills, we'll go through your checking account and figure out everything that you spend, then figure out what it is that you earn. And again, the good part of it is people who have been in relationships for many, many years and are never given access to this information because the person who's making the money is very old school, generally the man saying, you don't need to worry about that, I've got this, will now have access to that information because it's mandatory that it be disclosed. The state makes you disclose it. And in New York, that's the case as well. So full disclosure, when these women generally come to me and say, I'm so embarrassed, I have no idea what's going on with our finances, I say, this is the good news. You will never be in this position again. Anybody that's gotten divorced more than once and found themselves in that position the first time, sorry.
Yeah.
That does not happen a second time, because this time you actually figure it out. You may not want to deal with it on a daily basis, but you know what you have, you know what you spend, you know what you need to budget, and that is a real learning experience. And for many women, it gives you the power to move on to the next chapter of your life.
I'm curious, Paula, do you see any difference between women in America or elsewhere, or different parts of the country or demographics in terms of their attitudes towards this?
Yes, in fact, we have some early data that's very recent. We've done the survey, as you know, in the US, and we're doing this survey now globally. And I do believe that culturally we will see different things. I actually think there's parts of the globe, particularly, say, in Asia, where women are less, they don't abdicate as much as, say, the women in the US, which will be very fascinating. So we'll see more of that. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, we have to really listen to the voices of these divorcees and these widows, because they have so much to say. They've been through so much emotionally, and that they want to have a voice. And I think that this discussion that we continue to have is very rational. But I think we have to bring in the emotional piece in it, because those are the people I think that can change the conversation if we listen. But I still think there's a lot of I coulda, shoulda, woulda. I'm sure you hear that all the time.
And we don't want to be put in that position. If you can prevent being put in that position. And you bring up a good point about the emotions. One of the things that I want to make sure that people understand, what we haven't spoken about, is men's assumptions and the system that we are in that assumes that we don't know, right? So when I hosted my CNBC show, I would have 4 guys usually next to me. And after the first segment, they would sit down and just, shake my hand and think I was just any other anchor. And they sit down, and after the first segment, every other time, the man would turn to me and go, "You're smart." And I'd be like, "Yeah." So, but the assumption is there. And then another guy would say every other week, "Are you really Hispanic?" Again, the assumption. So instead of internalizing that, which I think a lot of women do, and I'm not blaming you for it, this is a system that we are brought up in that says that you don't know, that you're not smart enough, this is not the place for you. Instead of internalizing it, I let it light me on fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think your point about, Laura's point about the fact that actually, once you've had this experience of going through a divorce, you're never going to be so naive again. And I would imagine that anyone who's got daughters will make damn sure that they are very savvy. I mean, my own daughters are very, very clued up about money these days, and about jobs, and about having to be independent, because they've seen it and lived it in their own lives. But again, I'm very curious about this age dynamic here. And we're almost out of time, but before we finish, I'd like to end on one note, which perhaps is a little bit encouraging. The Women of the World actually did a survey before this event and asked people on an app the following question: do you find financial planning empowering or intimidating? And there's some good news, because actually 61% of the audience, 61% of people on the app said they found it empowering. Good. So either you lot are very savvy, or you knew what they were going to say already and had taken it to heart, or we may be seeing the beginning of a shift.
Yeah. No, I think, look, I think at the end of the day, financial planning is definitely important, right? It is the key to weave all the things together that we talked about, because the plan is about all those things. It's about your net worth. It's about everything that's additive. And I actually think we all need professionals in our lives. If we're professionals, you need to seek out help. And I think having the right financial advisor that engages both husbands and wives are very important. If that balance is not one and the same, then I think you need to reconsider your financial advisor relationship, because I think it's critical that both men and women participate in that conversation. And I do think that don't be afraid of this. It should not be intimidating. I always like to tell women that there's a rational side and an emotional side to money, right? The emotional side is ask the questions about yourself. Who's important to you? What's important to you? What do you fear? And then talk about those things with your spouse. And then at the end of the day, it's the framework, whether it's Laura's framework, Carmen, I'm sure you have a framework. My framework is around liquidity, longevity, and legacy. Right. Liquidity, how much money do I need to live on? What's my cash flow? Right. What are my debts? It's the longevity piece. How long do I think I'm going to live? And how much money am I going to need to live out my life? And then my legacy, which is what do I want to give to charities? What do I want to give to my children? So it's simple.
Right. Well, as long as that 61% weren't lying in the audience, the 61% who said they found financial planning empowering, it seemed that there is reason for hope and progress. So best of luck to all of you in figuring this out and taking control. And thank you for helping to illuminate how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
The incredibly brave, incredible Sunitha Krishnan, anti-trafficking activist. I'm Elise Nelson. I'm president and CEO of Vital Voices. I'm thrilled to be back at Women in the World, and of course, to be with Sunitha, who we've worked with for the last decade. 22 years ago, she started in this journey. 22 years ago, there were no laws on the books in any country to protect the victims or put the bad guys behind bars on this issue of human trafficking. 22 years ago, there were no international treaties or protocols. And in fact, 22 years ago, let's face it, quite frankly, many of us in this room didn't even know ourselves about the issue of human trafficking. 22 years ago is when Sunitha began working on the issue, began to stem the tide of human trafficking. As you saw in the film, she has rescued 20,000 women and children. She has actually... Probably even more important, if you can believe it, than that, is that she has really worked to put the traffickers behind bars, getting 1,600 convictions. She's trained 25,000 police officers, 10,000 lawyers. I mean, she is a one-woman crusader. And what I know about Sunitha is that this is a very personal mission for her. And I wonder, Sunitha, if you could just start off by telling us a little bit about how you began your work 2 decades ago.
I was 15, Alice, when I was gang raped by 8 men. I think the rape per se doesn't haunt me as such, as much as the shame, the guilt, the exclusion, the stigma that I was subjected to. I was made to feel like a criminal for a crime that I've never committed. I think the unfairness of that, the anger in me, is what is my driving force from then to now. And very shockingly and surprisingly, even after 26 years, that anger is not gone. The numbers of children who are raped, just 3 days back, an 8-year-old child was raped by gang raped in a temple in India. The numbers are just growing, and my anger is growing. That started me, that drives me, that sustains me.
So just on a day-to-day basis, you are a target from these traffickers, obviously, because they make a lot of money. You know, they have very strong motivations, and you believe very strongly that you've got to stand up not just to rescue the victims, but also to put these bad guys behind bars. So you're under threat because of that. Is that why this incident just happened?
I think, you know, it is a common sense to understand that if you're destroying somebody's business, you're destroying somebody's livelihood, they're not going to be happy with you. Every child that I rescue, if it's the youngest child that I've rescued is 3.5 years old from a brothel. A 10-year-old child is supposed to sleep with 40 men a day. Every man fetches that kind of money. So if you have 40 girls in a brothel, that's the kind of revenue you're destroying when you actually remove them out of that place of exploitation. So obviously, they are not too happy about me. They have been doing everything possible to destroy me and wipe me out. There was a time that they instigated the community around me and got my shelters evicted. 3 of my shelters located in different parts of the city was evicted because the community felt that we are polluting the place there. And there was this whole world of hostility created around us. Thanks to Vital Voices, Diane von Furstenberg, my guardian angel and friend, Tina Brown, we were able to create a safe shelter for these children. But unfortunately, those shelters are not safe anymore.
Yeah.
We've been having a new trend of attacks now. In the last 4 years, we've had 3 such attacks, and the most recent one was on the 21st of February.
So this one, I just want to stop you with this one. I mean, in the time that I've known you, you have been attacked personally 19 times. Acid attacks, people trying to run you off the road. But what's different about this attack and why it's so scary is that the 6 young women that perpetrated this crime came into your shelter as victims,
Absolutely.
But they were plants from the traffickers.
I think that was what was very shocking. And this has not happened. This is not the first time. This is the 3rd time in the last 4 years where traffickers and very young traffickers, women traffickers, have posed as victims and infiltrated into the shelter and engineered an attack from inside. They vandalized my place. They took glasses, broke glasses, took the glasses and stabbed my staff. One of my staff had 26 stitches in her stomach. And the last 2 months, we haven't slept because we could identify 6 of them. They were arrested and put in the jail. But when the police was investigating and interrogating them, they said about 6 more people inside. And those 6 more are still inside my shelter.
Wow.
And we can't do a thing about them.
Wait, why can't you do a thing about them?
Because they're not doing anything. They're just sitting there. We don't know what their master plan is. My people tell me not to come to the shelter because they think that the stab that went into the stomach of another staff of mine was actually meant for me. And these 6 are waiting for me. Somehow, it is a very scary situation where my children today have to witness blood, glass pieces everywhere. People are so scared. We don't know who is sitting next to you. And it breaks my heart that we say for heaven that I wanted so much for my children is no more safe.
Yeah.
And that, I can't tell you how gut-wrenching that is. And today, I'm so distressed. Lastly, because just 2 hours back, a child in my shelter, and every girl in my shelter is a daughter to me, 20-year-old girl, committed suicide. She hanged herself to death, meaning this is just not ending for us. We've never seen a suicide. So there is attack from outside, there is attack from inside. They're just making our life miserable at this moment.
So how do we get ahead of the traffickers? I mean, they are nimble, they adapt, they're highly motivated, they're well-networked, they're well-financed. They're always one step ahead.
But we are not.
But how do we get ahead?
I think the greatest tragedy of this world today is the good of the world are never organized. We sit here in these nice, wonderful halls, listen to all these wonderful stories. We are oh, ah, ooh, and we give the right kind of applause when it is required. But will we stand up and get organized against these criminals? They are far ahead of us. 40 million people in slavery today, 18 million people in India. Technology is aggravating the crime. We are still sensitizing people about this. While the criminals are far ahead, hundreds and thousands of lives are destroyed. And I want to ask each one of us, how many more before we stand up?
Do you think the problem's getting worse? Because, I mean, today, unlike when you started 22 years ago, we have laws on the books, right? We didn't have that. So there's 124 countries around the world who've got laws on the books that criminalizes human trafficking today. 150 countries that have laws to protect the victims. Why is it getting worse?
I think technology has been a great boost to the crime. It has made the crime more faceless, more classless, no borderless. You know, once upon a time when I started 22 years back, it was not very difficult to identify the profile of a victim. It would be somebody poor, a Dalit, a tribal girl, somebody from a very economically vulnerable group. But today you will see even middle-class girls in sex traffic through grooming, manipulation, social engineering. But young girls, 12 and 13-year-olds, who are actually being groomed through social media and then put into cyber pornography, cyber trafficking. So today, more than ever, this crime has become faceless, more clandestine. And what bothers me is that half the people in this audience will not even believe that their own children are vulnerable to this crime. We're still in a state of denial.
Right.
And that is the tragedy of us. You know, while the others are conspiring to bring as many people in, we are just waiting for this to happen to our own daughter.
Will it make any difference that India is now looking at a law on the books? Will that make any difference for your work? As you said, 18 million people today enslaved in India. That's half of the global population that are enslaved in India. So is that going to make a difference?
I fought for 14 years to get this legislation. It is my public interest litigation that has now bringing us this legislation. It is in the parliament, and I'm hoping that by the next parliament session, this parliament session, as you know about India, did not have any working time at all. They were fighting among each other so much that they didn't take up any bill. But we are hoping that at least in the next parliament session, the bill will be passed. But if it gets passed, at least on paper, for the first time, we have a commitment from the government saying that we recognize this as an organized crime. We recognize this as a crime where we want to invest our budgets in. We recognize this as a crime where victims have to be given all protection. So that will be the first acknowledgement of its kind in India. And I think that will be a very, very important statement for the mission.
You've talked about the feminization of criminality. Explain that.
I think no other crime other than sex trafficking has the highest number of women who are the face of the crime. From
the face of the crime?
Absolutely.
Not the victims, the face of the crime.
Face of the, also the victim and the crime. The primary procurer who lures a young girl from a village on the promise of a job, on the promise of marriage, or on the promise of a better opportunity is invariably a known woman. The middle chain must be some man coming in between, but the brothel keeper, the madam, the supervisor, the person who's controlling the whole place is again a woman. The traffickers who are infiltrating into my shelter and causing such huge damage are also women. And you can't imagine the ruthlessness with which they do it. But this time they targeted my creche, meaning I have little babies there, one-year-old baby and 7 months and 6 months babies. Of the victims there, 26 of them, they targeted those children, you know. So that is how ruthless the criminal force is, and very unfortunately, they are women.
You mentioned that you've trained 25,000, or I mentioned, but I know this from you, that you've trained 25,000 police officers. But I know that sometimes the police aren't always on your side. So what is their role in this?
I think anywhere in the world, it's not just India. An organized crime like human trafficking cannot exist without the active connivance of the system. The system, there is leakage in our system everywhere in the world. There is corruption everywhere in the world. And that is perhaps why this crime thrives. Any brothel in India is patronized by some section of the police, not all sections. There are good policemen, there are excellent officers, but there are also infiltrators among them who are part of the crime.
But the police also send you the victims, yes?
They are the ones who are the frontliners for the rescue. But I must tell you, Elise, it's very difficult to make out, because even as a practitioner, for me, it takes me a month to actually make out that there's something different about this person. During a rescue, when it is so much of chaos, it is very, very difficult to make out who's a victim and who's a trafficker, especially if that person is very young. I have a 19-year-old trafficker, meaning how young is that? So, you know, it is not very easy to, so I can't blame them for actually, you know, fixing traffickers and putting them inside my shelter. They're doing what they can after the crime is done. But we are the ones who are bearing the sleepless nights. We are the ones who are paranoid every time looking behind our back to see somebody's going to stab us. I don't like putting my children into so much of pain and fear.
I think there's a misconception often about a victim. I think people often believe that, you know, a brothel is raided and girls are taken to your shelter and that they want to be there, they want to be saved, but yet they're often so broken down that they actually want to leave the shelter. Explain that a little bit, the kind of trauma that goes on.
Most often, at least by the time they are rescued, and only hardly 7% of them get ever rescued, they have been raped by thousands of men. They've already started surviving in the experience of being exploited. They have started normalizing the experience of exploitation. So by the time you get this person out, she actually believes that that hell is better than this shelter. And she actually looks at me as an abuser who's removing her from her safe space. By this time, she also has Stockholm Syndrome, so she's attached to the abuser. She thinks that the abuser who's taking care of her, loving her, providing that little space of intimacy. So the first few weeks in my shelter is dealing with hostile victims, people who are self-harming themselves, harming others, trying to escape the shelter. And then there's a whole lot of them sitting outside my gate, creating hell for me, trying to take these girls out of my place because they are losing their livelihood, because every minute spent in my shelter is loss of livelihood for many others outside. So it's kind of a very, very vitriolic situation this way and that way. And most people don't understand that. People think just making one donation sometime solves the problem. We are living and sustaining those safe shelters, meaning every day we have to live with this, and half of them are HIV positive. So if I'm not doing any of this, I'm cremating dead bodies, nothing else. And even in dead bodies, I don't get a cremation ground easily because it's a HIV positive dead body. So for every step, we have to take that extra mile to do things, So yeah, it's
Just to give you a sense of what Sunitha deals with on a daily basis. I remember when I first met her, she was telling me that 98% of the children, very young as like 3 months old, who come into her shelter, 98% are HIV positive. And I thought, oh, is it passed from their mother? Why are they HIV positive? And she said, no, it's because they were trafficked at 3 months old.
3 years old.
Raped at 3 years old. And I just think about how you carry that weight on a day-to-day basis. It's truly something I can't ever fathom.
I think the smile on my children's faces when they recover and gain back their dignity, that keeps me going. But before I end, I think the time is getting over, so I want to say one thing to all the traffickers out there. I know they're watching me now. I just want to tell them that you can't wipe us out. The war is on. Even if I'm not there, even if I'm dead and gone, there are many others who will continue the fight. There are warriors who will wipe this slavery out, and you cannot wipe us out.
Thank you. Thank you.
That General Flynn was compromised with respect to the Russians. I believe that it is the responsibility of the Attorney General, if the President asks him or her to do something that he or she believes is unlawful or unconstitutional, to say no. And that's what I did.
The saddest thing is that because I'm the President of the United States, I am not supposed to be involved with the Justice Department.
A lot of people are disappointed in the Justice Department, including me.
My God. Okay. Thank you. I think you just won the nomination, actually, or something.
Let's just stop right here.
Okay.
It's only downhill from here.
Welcome, Sally Yates, the woman who wouldn't back down. We just heard today another piece of news. How can we ever keep off our news alerts? That because of the raid, the FBI raid of the president's attorney's office, Michael Cohen, the president has his team, his legal team, is now rethinking that whether or not he's going to be interviewed by the special prosecutor, Robert Mueller. So tell us, what are the implications of President Trump being interviewed by Robert Mueller or not?
Well, you know, I've seen lots of lawyers interviewed on cable news over the last few weeks about whether if they were the president's lawyer, they would advise him to agree to sit down with Bob Mueller. And I'll have to tell you, I've been kind of stunned by this conversation because they're talking about it as if the president was just Joe Smith who's being investigated for bank fraud or something. And they're trying to decide what's the best legal advice. I mean, this is the president of the United States. He raised his hand and said that he wanted to be the leader of our country. And he asked us to entrust him with that and to give up some of our freedom. He's making some decisions for us. And so it seems to me when the questions are so important here, it's about a foreign adversary attacking our democracy and whether he or members of his campaign were part of it. I don't understand how he would have the moral authority to lead this country if he didn't answer those questions.
Well, are you surprised that more GOP lawmakers don't push back against Trump's absolutely arrant, refusal to in any way, accept any kind of governmental norms? I mean, what do you see about the GOP in all of this kind of assenting circle?
And that's been a really disappointing thing, I think, in this whole process. Look, there are lots of policies of this administration with which I disagree. But elections have consequences, and you have to expect that there's going to be a change in policies. But it's the all-out assault on democratic institutions and norms that you don't expect, and that I think is frankly far more dangerous than any of the particular policy issues here. And that, to me, is what is so disappointing, that there have been so few Republicans who have been willing to step up and say, no, there's a line here. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in a free press. We believe in independent courts.
Well, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan has just said that he's not running for re-election. Do you see him as part of that sort of circle of assent?
I don't know about sort of ascribing it to particular people. I do think, though, that not speaking and not doing anything is a decision. And that makes you part of it if you don't speak up.
I'll say that. Well, you knew Special Counsel Robert Mueller, of course, for a long time when he served as FBI director, and you, of course, were there at the same time. Do you think he's going to be able to complete the Russia investigation? Because Trump, seems like one Twitter away always from getting him fired or firing him himself.
I know. In fact, I think we probably ought to have somebody with a live news feed as we speak now.
It's
just in case something else happens while we're talking. And that does create a tremendous amount of anxiety, doesn't it? I mean, it's been weeks now where I think we've all been holding our breath as to whether he's going to fire Bob Mueller or whether he's going to fire Rod Rosenstein. And it feels like we're teetering on the brink of the demise of the rule of law. And certainly, perhaps if he could do it and get away with it, I think he might fire Bob Mueller. I think he's been very clear that he'd like to see him go away and the whole investigation go away. I think it's a question of whether he can do it and get away with it.
There's been a lot of handicapping about the probable choice instead of firing Rob Rosenstein. And I'm not sure that people, he's the Trump appointee who's overseeing the Russia investigation, appointed by Jeff Sessions because Jeff had to recuse himself. And he's now on the hit list himself. So walk us through the significance, though, if Rob Rosenstein does get removed. What should we be concerned about?
Yeah, I think we should be just as concerned about the possibility that the president might remove Rod Rosenstein as we are Bob Mueller. And that's because the Deputy Attorney General, the DAG, as it's commonly called, actually controls the scope of the investigation for the special counsel. And so Mueller has to come to the DAG before he takes any big steps, and that includes searches or charges. The DAG also has control over whether a public report is prepared and made public, and also whether information is presented to Congress for potential articles of impeachment. So the Deputy Attorney General can control a whole lot of this, but what's even more dangerous and insidious about firing Rod would be that he can do all of that in secret because people don't know. When I say he, I mean his replacement could do all of that in secret. Because people don't really know what decisions the Deputy Attorney General is making. And the idea that you would fire the Deputy Attorney General essentially in retaliation for a search being executed on your lawyer's office. I mean, what did happen to the rule of law here, where the laws are supposed to apply equally to everyone, regardless of who you are?
And yet, Rob Rosenstein did sign off on that raid, the FBI raid. It kind of was a kind of wonderful moment, really, because it made us all feel, I think, that there's a kind of growing resistance, which, of course, you were the very first of the resistors. You quit within 10 days. But is there
Actually, I didn't quit, but...
You were fired. Yeah. I beg your pardon. Thank you for that. You were fired after 10 days because you resisted. But, I mean, do you think it means that the sort of judicial community are basically saying, we will not be patsies, there is a life beyond Trump? Do you think that it's going to be easy for him to find a legal patsy to do these things?
I think it's going to be difficult for him to do it. Look, I know a lot of the folks at the Department of Justice and FBI and, worked with them for many, many years. These are really dedicated public servants. They don't view themselves as part of the resistance. They view themselves as committed to the rule of law, to applying the law to the facts and calling it like they see it without any kind of political agenda. And that's what we should want them to do, to call it just like they see it.
So we live in a democracy that's supposed to have checks and balances. Why isn't it working?
Well, actually, it's holding. The institutions are holding in the sense that courts are still carrying out their obligations, despite, again, the assault from the president trying to undermine the legitimacy of individual judges and the judicial system generally. The Department of Justice has been doing what it's supposed to do. The press is still continuing to do what it's supposed to do. But that doesn't mean that we're not seeing real damage here, because the loss of public confidence in these democratic institutions is really damaging. When the president tries to reach into DOJ on what's now become almost a daily basis, from trying to goad them into going after his former political rival to dropping the case on Mike Flynn or Sheriff Arpaio or whoever it is, the flavor of the day that he wants indicted, when he does that, the public starts to believe that the Department of Justice does operate politically, and they lose confidence in the system. And then where does that leave us for the next administration in terms of what those norms are? So even if the institutions hold, and they're holding, it's shaky, but they're holding, real damage is done.
Well, before you jumped into the public view in such a dramatic fashion, you spent 27 years at the Justice Department. Did you ever expect your career to end the way that it did?
No. I had started as a line prosecutor, and it's called an AUSA in Atlanta, and went from that to being appointed to the U.S. Attorney position in Atlanta by President Obama, and then was incredibly lucky to serve as DAG, and then ever so briefly as Acting Attorney General. And no, I never expected that, and in fact did not want to end my 27 years with the Department of Justice being fired. But at the same time, I felt like to have done anything other than what I did and making the decision that I did with respect to the travel ban would have really betrayed all of those 27 years prior to that.
Well, arguments over the travel ban are actually going to be heard by the Supreme Court in a few weeks. How do you think this is going to end? I think people are somewhat confused about the state of the travel ban and what is happening to it.
Well, we're on travel ban 3.0 now.
Right.
The one on which I made my decision was the very first travel ban that was in some ways markedly different than this one. You may recall that when it came out, it actually applied to people who were valid green card holders, LPRs, here in our country. It applied to people who had valid visas. So literally folks are in the air coming back to the States from having been on vacation or otherwise, and they were being turned away at our airports, despite the fact that they had valid visas and green cards. There were other differences there, so it's unclear to me. They've done a better job at narrowing, in some ways, the scope of this travel ban, of laying out a purported national security reason for it. I'm still concerned, though, that it's infected with the same animus that infected the first one, which was the president's articulated desire to effectuate a Muslim ban. And when he said prior to his inauguration that, we're not going to call it Muslim ban anymore, we're going to call it territories. Well, that's the precise thing that he did with the first travel ban. And that, I'm concerned that same animus, the racial animus there, infects all of them.
Well, you were Deputy Attorney General under both Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch, and as we've heard, Acting Attorney General for 10 days. What is your assessment of the current Attorney General, Jeffrey Sessions, and what do you think he's accomplished so far? I mean, put that in a very neutral way.
Okay, how long do we have?
Go.
No, from a policy standpoint, I disagree with many, if not most, of the decisions that Attorney General Sessions is making. He has reversed the criminal justice reform work that we had undertaken in terms of charging and sentencing policies, in terms of prison reform. Certainly the emphasis on immigration and lower-level drug offenders is, I think, totally inconsistent both with a wise use of resources at the Department of Justice as well as leads to unjust results. And so, I could go through and tick off, many different policies with which I disagree there. But again, elections have consequences. Those are the policies that then candidate Trump articulated, and he was elected. So none of us should be really shocked that those are the policies that are being carried out now at DOJ. And certainly the lack of aggressive enforcement in the civil rights arena is one of the most tragic changes, I think, there. So I'm disappointed in that. On the other hand, I will say that Attorney General Sessions recused himself when he should have from the Russia investigation, and there have been other steps that he has taken that I think has reflected a respect for the rule of law. And so while I disagree on a policy standpoint, I'm kind of pulling for him right now with respect to the Russia investigation, because if he is replaced, it will be, in my view, for no other reason than to put someone in place who can then control the special counsel.
Talk to us just a minute about Robert Mueller, because you know this man extremely well. He's become, to many people, a kind of caped crusader figure, right? I mean, he operates in total silence and stealth. Things happen that nobody expected. He always catches everybody by surprise. How is it working with Robert Mueller? Can you tell us a little bit about what his process is to work with?
He is just the person that we should all want in that position, because Bob Mueller is he is a just the facts ma'am kind of guy. I mean, he's going to look at the facts, he's going to look at the law, all of this Twitter stuff and all, it's rolling off his back. He is going to do his job, and he doesn't really care what the noise out there might be. And if there's a case to be made, he's going to make it. But at the same time, if there's not a case to be made, if there are really offensive things that happen, but they're not violations of the law, Bob Mueller is not going to try to gin up a case just to justify his existence. And again, that's exactly what we should want to happen here. So I have tremendous confidence in him, as long as everybody will just leave him alone and let him do his job.
Well, you obviously have this great passion for the law. It's quite clear to everybody here, I think, and you come from a very distinguished legal family in Georgia. Was it inevitable that you went into law, and what is it, why have you been so drawn to working in the Justice Department?
I swore off being a lawyer. I mean, there are lawyers on both sides of my family. My father, both grandfathers, even my grandmother, actually, was one of the earliest women admitted to the Georgia bar. And so when I graduated from college, I was of the view, I don't want to be a lawyer, I don't want to be married to a lawyer, and I really don't want a lot of lawyer friends. I am a lawyer, I'm married to a lawyer, and we have lots of lawyer friends. And so much for those great plans. But I was in private practice, actually, at a terrific firm in Atlanta, and went to the Justice Department on the recommendation of former Attorney General Griffin Bell, who was a partner in that firm. And he suggested that I go and try it out there and come back to the firm. And I thought I would do that in a few years, and I got to DOJ and had the opportunity to, and I know this sounds incredibly corny, but I mean, truly, the mission of DOJ is to seek justice, and that's it. It's not to convict people, it's not to win trials, it's to seek justice. And what an incredible privilege as a lawyer to have that be your mission every single day. So,
well, it's very different, as we
I
know,
couldn't
from
leave.
what the atmosphere is now. And in fact, James Comey, about whom I know you can't really speak because it's all part of the things that are happening, but his book has just leaked, and he has really likened to President Trump's MO to that of a crime boss. Right? And he talks about how this whole atmosphere around Trump, he comports himself like a crime boss with the needs to have fealty and the needs to have complete loyalty in the gang and so forth. Is this how you see it also?
Well, that's a very colorful description that Jim has there for the president. Look, I didn't have as long a personal interaction with President Trump as Director Comey did, but I have observed from the outside as a citizen, just as all of you have, that he seems to view the Department of Justice as his own personal lawyers to carry out his wishes rather than being representatives of the people of the United States. And when you have a president who doesn't get that or just chooses to ignore that, that's a real problem.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that we can go back to normal, as it were, when this president has gone? I think one of the things that is worrying people tremendously is this the new normal? Is this the new normal? Are we now going to have a presidency which is this daily reality show of breathtaking assaults on a norm that we thought was there to be, the presidency? Is it going to be as it is now?
Well, I actually think that's up to all of us. We can't control what President Trump does, but we can control how we respond to it. And I get that it's exhausting, and as you said, with the onslaught on a daily basis of things that just are not normal. But if in our fatigue of that we normalize this, then we're going to be the ones responsible for having this continue to be the new normal then after that. So I think it's calling them out. It's making sure that we don't normalize it, even in our, just our personal discussions with our family and friends and coworkers, that we make sure we plant a flag about who we are as a country and what we stand for, and we hold on to that, and we don't let anybody take that away from us.
Well, that's great. They clap you all the time. So now you're at the peak of your powers. You did not expect to, have ended your justice career in this abrupt fashion. How do you want to spend the next decade of your life, Sally? And how are you considering yourself running for office? You clearly are somebody a public servant who cares so enormously. Surely there is a political future for you.
Well, that's nice. I've been asked about running for office, and look, I clearly do feel drawn to public service. I mean, I think that's obvious, or I wouldn't have stayed at DOJ for so long. But I kind of feel like most people who run for office have always wanted to do that. There's sort of something inside of them that is driven for that. And while I feel drawn to public service, I've never felt drawn to running for elected office. And so, I said something a couple of weeks ago when I was interviewed that my husband really wants me to run for office. And so he has said, just don't say never. Just when you answer that question, don't say never. So, as I said then, in deference to him on this, I won't say, but I have a hard time seeing that.
Well, special circumstances can create special moments, right?
Sounds like you've been talking to my husband.
No, I'm just trying to warm you up here because clearly this reception here today. Looking back over your career at the Justice Department, what are you proudest of? I mean, I know you worked tremendously, as you said, on justice reform. We have an amazing woman later who is a formerly incarcerated woman who's going to be talking about reforming prisons for women. But what are you proudest of in the Justice Department? Because obviously you can't always be defined on the fact that you were fired by President Trump.
No, and it is a little weird to have spent 27 years there and yet to be defined by that last act. On the other hand, I do feel like it's reflective of how I tried to do my job for all of those years. And, part of from the time that I was in AUSA and had really incredible mentors there, when you represent the people of the United States, that's different than just being a regular lawyer, because it's really important that we went about doing our jobs in a way that would engender the trust of the people that we served. And so I guess I take pride in two things. One, in those everyday cases that I did when I was a line prosecutor or those that I oversaw when I was U.S. Attorney, that I tried to make sure that we were always fair in what we did, that it wasn't just to win, but that we were treating people fairly. And then during the time that I was Deputy Attorney General, I worked really hard on criminal justice reform, whether it was in sentencing reform and advocating in the Senate, or in working with President Obama and the Clemency Initiative to adjust really disproportionate sentences that individuals had received who were lower-level drug offenders. And then a real personal passion of mine is prison reform. And we instituted some really significant changes, like building a semi-autonomous school district within the Federal Bureau of Prisons so that people can get the education they need to be able to be successful when they come out, and adjusting programming and halfway houses. You know, the fact of the matter is that not only do I feel like we have a moral obligation to do that, to give people just those basic tools that they need to have a fighting chance to be successful when they get out, it also is absolutely essential for the safety of our communities to address recidivism. And so I'm always so perplexed when those programs are pulled and folks don't understand that the only way we're going to have truly safe communities is if we invest in people on the front end to prevent crime, and then in prisons as well to give them the tools that they need. So those two things would be, well,
if there's one thing that you could hope for now in this current unbelievable melee of what's going on, what are the things that we need to be the most alert for? I mean, you know, every day we get a new assault, as we've discussed. What should we all be watching out for now? What do we have to be alert for so that we, in this audience, can actually, you know, assert our voices? What do you warn us about, Sally?
Well, you know, we've talked about this assault on norms, and certainly the rule of law and ensuring that the Department of Justice operates independently is absolutely at the top of the list for me. But there are other norms as well, with the assault on the press. And, you know, we all know how essential a free press is to our democracy, with respect for courts. But, you know, I think to me, those are the things to look out for that I think are most dangerous. But out of all of this, because, you know, I don't want to be just a total downer here, but out of all of this, one of the things that's been most inspiring to me is all over this country, men and particularly women are feeling it right now and are plugged in and are paying attention to what's going on. And, you know, people who never before would have been out protesting are doing that now and are really getting actively involved in the policy decisions of our country. I mean, just look at the Parkland kids. Is that humbling or what?
Yeah.
To see what they have done?
It's true. It's true. I'm very happy to say we do have Delaney Tarr and we do have Naomi Sadler from the Parkland Kids who are going to be coming tomorrow. So that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Sally Yates, you're very inspiring indeed. You are a big resistor. You are a hero. We're so honored to have had you with us. Thank you so much for joining us at Women in the World.
It was a privilege. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Overloading the cases here, and no enough beds, no enough medications, no enough doctors, and no enough nurses.
Hello, I'm Rula Jibril. I'm a journalist, author, and a foreign policy expert. I would love to welcome two remarkable Yemeni women today. We will speak about the war, the forgotten war in Yemen, a war that we don't talk about in the media too often. We're too busy with SORMI and other things. The UN last week said that the war in Yemen created the worst humanitarian crisis since the founding of the United Nations itself. With me will join me two remarkable women, Afra Nasser, who is an award-winning journalist and a blogger who is exiled in Sweden. And here is a friend of mine who I actually admire her work greatly, and Bushra Al-Khubaidi. And she's wearing a niqab. She's wearing a niqab because her work, Yemen Care, is under threat. They provide shelter for people, they provide food, they provide medical aid, but they're threatened because they work in the worst areas in Yemen. And I will start with you. You just flew from Yemen, and I know that you've been working so hard on the issue since the beginning. But also you have 2 master's degrees, and when you married your husband, you put as a condition to marry him that he would accept that you pursue your degrees. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely right.
Can you please tell us about the magnitude of the crisis in Yemen today?
Actually, what's happening in Yemen is so difficult to explain for people living in this life and what's going on in Yemen, because it's massive needs and massive crisis. As you just mentioned, the UN declared that it's the worst crisis that is happening nowadays. You could imagine, like, out of 27 million people, 22.2 million are in massive need for different type of needs. They are in need of food, they are in need of clean water, they are in need of shelter, they are in need of health and nutrition, education. This is what's happening in Yemen. It's a forgotten war that is nobody talking about. Nobody knows what's going on in Yemen. Hardly some people know where Yemen is in the map. So what's happening here? We're talking about death of people, death of men and women and innocent children who had nothing to do with that. They had nothing to do with that. They just woke up, and sometimes they don't wake up just to find themselves without any basic services of life, without food, without shelter, homeless, and might also have lost their own beloved ones.
So, Bushra, you arrived, you managed displaced people, refugees, and you find yourself in that situation. Can you explain to us, please, in numbers, the crisis? The UN says that every hour, every day actually in Yemen, there are 130 children who died. There's 50,000 children who died since the beginning of this crisis. There's almost 2 million people who are in need of health care, and there's cholera. Can you tell us about these diseases that disappeared from our history, but there's outbreak of these diseases in Yemen?
Let me start with my displacement story. When I used to work for CARE, I joined CARE in 2010, and when we were started to provide the humanitarian assistance to the people, providing education, clean water, food, and economic resources for them to empower men and girls and children as well. In 2015, I found myself being displaced by force. I had no choice other than to run after my life and to escape with my kid and my husband, and also look for my staff who were working in that area. We found ourselves like facing the same critical situation where displaced people are. I cannot forget that day when that feeling, the bitter of leaving home behind, leaving everything behind. My son was telling me, "Mommy, can I take my toys with me?" And I was like, "Yusuf, I don't think there's time for this. Let's just run for our life." There was no time even to pick my son's toys. I cannot forgive myself that I didn't even listen to him, because I told him, we're gonna come back. This is just, it's not gonna take more than 2 weeks, a month maximum. But what happened is we were never able to come back. And millions of people are not able to come back to their homes. They've lost their homes. They've lost their lives. We were displaced again to another place. I stayed with my sister, and then airstrikes were there where 2 family members died. And I had to witness this death. My son, the 12 years old now, has witnessed this. And when he was asking me why this is happening, why my best friend has died, the same age he is, just died for no reason. When he asked me this question, I couldn't answer this.
But he told you something when you came here. What is the message that Yusuf asked you to carry to the American audience here, to the women of today?
That was just 2 days right before I come here. There was heavy airstrikes in the hotel where we were staying together, and we were just holding each other's, and it was so terrible. It was so close, and we thought this is something really serious, which is like every day we're facing. But then we were just holding each other. He was just hugging me, and he said, "Mommy, go and save Yemen." Because he thinks that somebody has to do something, and he would be the most affected person of me leaving him behind in the country.
That's a Yusuf picture behind us. Please look at him, and when you think about Yemen. Afra, I want to ask you, so clearly we don't know much about Yemen, but can you explain to us how this conflict started, and who are the players?
Well, before I answer your question, I want to ask the audience, how many of you were, what's going on in Yemen? How many of you know?
Please raise your hands. Anybody heard about Yemen?
That's improvement, actually. I was expecting none. But coming to the US for the second time, and even working internationally, covering Yemen and speaking about, the international aspect to the conflict in Yemen, I'm struggling myself as a journalist to pitch stories and publish, because not a lot of people want to know about what's happening in Yemen or publish something about the war in Yemen. Absolutely, Yemen is underreported. It's in comparison to the conflict in Syria or natural disasters. Yemen is not getting equivalent media attention, and also considering that it is the largest, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world today, it's not getting enough media attention. And this is very shocking for me, especially for American audience, while Yemenis themselves on the ground know that this war is not only the Saudi-led coalition airstrike or war, it's also the American bombs falling on their heads and falling on their houses. When I call my family, like my mom is busy going to a funeral or coming back from a funeral. Death is everywhere. If the airstrikes don't kill you, the lack of medicine and food and the cholera and the diseases will definitely kill you. It's a very, very tragic situation, and Yemenis know that the weapons falling on them are American-made. Only in 2018, Donald Trump signed a weapon deal with Saudi MBS with $12.5 billion. So actually, there are internationally banned weapons that were dropped in Yemen by the Saudi-led coalition that are reportedly by the reports from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty that are sealed with Western governments. So clearly, what's happening in Yemen is being assisted and supported by Western powers that are allies to the Saudi-led coalition. And on the same time, there are a raging civil war on the ground where there are rebel groups that are targeting systematically civilian areas such as in Taiz or other areas. And Yemenis are terribly suffering by all these sides. Yemen is literally under fire from multi-fronts. And nobody has nobody has to live in that situation.
So the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was here after a spree of kidnapping his own relatives in Riyadh. He came here. He was received by Donald Trump, by every elite group from Silicon Valley to Hollywood, celebrated with everybody. He's on the cover of Time magazine, and he's been called reformist. While he was defense minister, that was his signature policy. Can you tell us about how this forgotten war, underreported war, can be the juxtaposition between us calling this man who's leading that war and the blockade a reformist, and what's happening on the ground.
It's actually thanks to such groups like Women in the World that are, doing, and when it comes to the American civil society organization, they're doing remarkable job in trying to challenge that kind of narrative. When it comes to the governments, I don't have any hope with, the U.S., the White House administration being, an ally to MBS and giving a green light of committing whatever MBS would like to commit in Yemen. And I find it shocking that we could call a reformist the MBS while he's waging a war in the poorest Arab country. How could we call him a reformist when he's, enforcing a blockade that are, intentionally and deliberately using food as a weapon of war, blocking food for people to in Yemen, blocking access for journalists to go and report what's happening in Yemen, blocking medicine, blocking people for people to flee. When you think about Yemen being surrounded by these monarchies that are coming together to bomb this poorest Arab country, so this is cruelty. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of the U.S. media was glorifying the reforms he was making back home, and I think it was just a disgrace to dismiss the disastrous policies MBS is doing in Yemen. And it's thanks to such organization that we are trying to send the message, and hopefully the audience will be, enlightened.
Bushra, I want to ask you about this. And so Americans understand very well the costs of any war. In the 80s, 79, there was Afghanistan. That unholy alliance with the jihadists, then many years after, Afghanistan became the playground for jihadists. Can Yemen become that in less than 5 years? A playground for jihadists, radicalization, there's no education?
I would say, and I would add to what Afrah mentioned about the 2.5 billion that was bought for weapons. I would say if we had all this money just to save the people in Yemen, what remarkable change we would have done. And I'm afraid to say that from what I see in the ground, from the people I see and the people I work with and I assist back in Yemen, I'm afraid to say that Yemen is going to be worse than Afghanistan.
So it will come back to haunt us, to haunt even the Americans who are unaware of what's going on the ground.
The problem is what's happening in Yemen is it's multiple crises. It's only not man-made. We have epidemics that has been disappeared for decades. Who would have imagined that cholera is back to the history? And it's just happening in Yemen.
You yourself had a fever. And would you like to talk about your health condition?
Yes. Actually, I had a dengue fever, and this is one of the killing diseases back in Yemen. So you could see the people are dying from the cholera, from the airstrikes, from the ground fighting, from the dengue fever, from the diphtheria. There are several diseases. You could have, it's too hard to put all together in your mind.
And the blockade is forbidding the medications to come.
Absolutely.
And that is Saudi Crown Prince signature.
When I got sick back in January, I had the access to the facilities, to medical facilities, but it was really poor. And I was going through, I thought that it's gonna be it. I thought this is the end of my life because it was really serious. And I was just thinking, how people are just surviving because this, I would have imagined women in the rural areas or anywhere, they don't have access. I was just dying and I had the access to the medical services. I had the people around me. I was with my family at home and I had all the facilities. And for the poor people, they had no other choice other than just die.
Afra, what can we do here in the United States to pressure our politicians or even to help Yemen? What can we do from here? What can any of the people sitting in this
It's
audience?
tragic what's happening in Yemen. As someone who lived in Sweden, I think animals are better treated than how Yemenis are living, the conditions Yemenis are forced to live with. I get inspired by how, the anti-war movement in the U.S. during the Vietnam War, and I think I want more and more of the Americans to go and to speak out against the war in Yemen and help pressure your senators to raise Yemen at the Congress, because at the Congress that's where our hope is. If your representatives are speaking against the American role in Yemen, at least we can help in stopping one actor in the war. Yemen is being, splitting into an international war. And you could bring peace to Yemen if you speak out and write to your representatives and write to them, what are we doing in Yemen? Why people are living in famine? Why people like Bushra have to live through, such diseases that are supposed to be, left in history that our civilization dealt with a long time before. So I believe in the American people. I don't believe in the government or on the White House. But I believe that if Americans actually fix politics in this country, they could put an end to the war in Yemen.
And Bushra, also I want to ask you, how can we help your organization, Care Yemen?
That's what I wanted to say. It's not only one thing that can be done to Yemen. There are many things that can be done to Yemen to help, stopping what's happening. I think peace is the first thing that we would call for, because within the funding organizations like CARE and INGOs who are helping the people in Yemen is not going to be enough. Peace has to come first. How can we just stop or help the people while they're still not safe? So, death is being faced every day. So peace is the first thing that we should call for and advocate for this to make it happen. And I think as a woman, it's as a woman leader, and I'm sure all this stage with wonderful women all over the world can make the difference. And this is what we are born for, to make the world a better place for us and for others.
And I must say, while Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was in Paris after his trip here, human rights organizations are suing him for torture, for rape in Yemen, and for the use of weapons that are banned. I must say, it was an honor to be with these incredible, brave, remarkable women, and I would love to thank especially Women in the World and Tina Brown for talking and bringing center stage this crisis in Yemen. In the Arab world, we say that the richest country in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, is bombing to oblivion the poorest country, which is Yemen, with the help of the Americans.
And I think people also have to remember that what Martin Luther King once said, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice here. So protect justice globally.
And bring peace to Yemen.
One last word. One last word to you, Bushra. If you have to think about your son's future, in 10 years from today, he's 12, when he will be 22, how do you see his future?
That's a very difficult question, because I'm afraid I don't know where he's going to be if this is not stopping. I think if not, he's not dead, hopefully somewhere else better.
Thank you, Bushra, and I really commend your courage and bravery. Thank you.
Very competitive. I know what I want.
I go with my instincts. I go with my gut. friend Sam Cass, who's the executive director of our Let's Move initiative.
Man, that was pretty good. That was awesome. How is everybody? Good? We are psyched to be here. You know, I got to say, you saw I worked with the First Lady Michelle Obama for many years, and I feel right at home being like sort of the only guy or one of two guys in a room full of powerful, badass women. So I got to say, I'm really comfortable in this setting.
Well, I thought you were going to say I was like the first lady, you know?
Yeah, that too. So we have two amazing women chefs who I really admire and look up to. And, you know, in America, only 10% of restaurants are female-owned. So trends and things I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about, you know, are playing out in the food industry. But today we have Chef Dominique Crenn and my dear friend, Chef Barbara Lynch, who have been pioneers in this industry for a long, long time. So let's jump right in.
All right.
So you guys know each other well, have very distinctive styles.
Not really.
Not really? No.
I don't like her. Completely different. Actually, I do all the cooking when we have to work together. She's, I made your bread. I made your crackers the last time.
Oh, yes, you did.
That's right.
All right, so Dominique, describe Barbara's style for everybody.
Oh, Jesus. I gotta be nice, right?
Yes, you should. You should give it a whirl.
No, I met Barbara years ago, and I looked at her as being an incredible human being, so much energy, and I think her style is when you are with her, it's what you see is what you get. You know, there is no no lies, nothing. She's an incredible cook. She's an incredible mentor, and she made incredible crackers for me.
The art of the cracker. Okay, Barbara, your turn.
Okay. Yes, I did. I met Dominique, gosh, I don't know when. I think it was in San Francisco.
When I was
way
18?
Back. I told her I brought a sous chef with me, and I really didn't. And she knew it right away because the person wasn't skilled on knives. So we were laughing about that. Dominique's food, I think, which I'm cooking with you next week, she's very poetic and artistic. And she, what I love about her is she does love America and she loves cooking here, but she's also taking her culture and her cuisine and making amazing food. I mean, didn't you just are you like the chef of the world now or best chef?
No, not really.
It's true. She is. So as a chef, I'm always curious about how chefs get started, what inspired them. So Barbara, maybe start with you. You know, you grew up with a single mom with 3 jobs, you know, but every night you came home to a home-cooked meal. Tell me how that shapes your approach to food and really what inspired you to become a chef.
Yeah, my mom was a widow, and she had 7 of us, and I was the last Lynch. And she worked very hard to keep us off welfare. And I come from very humble beginnings. I actually haven't graduated high school. I never went to college. A huge learning disability. But I did know that if I could cook, that I'd always have a job. Mm-hmm. But, and I love, God, I love cooking. I love being in the kitchen. I love building teams. I love, you know, when a chef works for me for over 10, 12 years, you know, I want to be there to invest in him or her in their own restaurant. I just love the flour and water. I mean, you can make amazing pasta. I just love cooking.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know it sounds funny, but I just and I'm really it came natural to me. The part that didn't come natural is the business part. 8 restaurants later, but it's and I love that now. I just love it.
Yeah. Kitchens are places where people who, you know, otherwise maybe would struggle in sort of very formal environments can come and truly be themselves and not be scared of just rolling up their sleeves.
No, you know, you have to work together.
Yeah.
And you have to stick to your vision and get that team right behind you. And I love that.
Yeah. So, Dominique, you hail from France. Didn't go to culinary school. So, correct?
No.
You did?
No.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, me neither.
Absolutely
I'm
not.
with you on that. What a waste of cash, right?
No, yes, I'm French, proud of it.
Are you really? As you should be.
I'm a person of the world. I'm a people of the world. No, I mean I study. I went to school.
You did?
Yes.
All right. How did you? I'm proud of you.
I have a bachelor in economy and I have an international business degree. And so anyway, I didn't learn cooking at school. I'm French, so I know how to cook. You know, it's in our blood. Anyway, when I came to San Francisco, I wanted to do something with my life, and I wanted to find at the time a vehicle to be able to express myself, but also to be a voice. And I thought cooking was natural for me. So I just started to work on the people. So for me, cooking is I love cooking. I think cooking brings people together, but cooking is a language, you know, and that language, it's also an art, and
it's nurturing.
It's nurturing, but also there is things that you can. I think change can go. You know, you can do changes through cooking and through food and to the community. So. My dad was a politician. He was also a painter. So maybe this is, you know, I find food as politics. And I was lucky enough to be given a platform. So now I'm here to fight for the people that don't have a voice. So that's what I'm doing.
I love it. I love it. So kitchens are notoriously tough places. You know, full of a bunch of angry, mostly men who do a lot of yelling and screaming.
Yeah.
And so as a young woman growing up, you know, I know you work for Todd English, a notorious guy on that front. You know, how was that? How did that shape you? What was that experience like? How did that translate into how you then ran your kitchens?
Yeah. Well, 8 years with Todd, I learned what not to do, which is to be a screamer in the kitchen without any reason, actually. You know, it was brutal working for him, but what I did learn is that, you know, I'm going to be in this business for a long time.
Yep.
And I need to treat people with dignity and how I would want to feel when I'm where I work. You know, I didn't like to have to feel like I was on eggshells. The men part, forget about it. Like, I didn't have time for that crap. So, you know, I'd just say, I'll see you in the window, and you know, it was my mission. It's like a game of hockey. It's like I always wanted to be the best dish on the pass, and yeah. So I just didn't listen to that other shit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Not competitive. You know, you're not competitive at all.
You know, I say I'm not competitive.
Yes,
I think,
you are.
Yeah, of course you are. My dish has to be the best on the pass, but you're not competitive.
Yeah, to myself, I'm competitive. About myself,
Got
and
it.
I will compete to be a better person every day for sure. And you know, to give back. This is where I'm at now. Is just to give back what, you know. Knowledge is power, and really, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing some amazing stuff, which we'll get to in a second. So, Dominique, like the tradition of yelling and screaming in tough kitchens comes from France, I would say. Has its origins.
Actually, the French women are harder to cook with than the men.
Oh.
Whoa.
They're tough.
So
well,
how,
yes,
it is. Can you relate to that experience? What was it like for you?
Unfortunately, you know how the French Christians were with this coffee, you know, brigade and like the army, and you yell at each other. And I mean, I knew that, you know, and I remember my dad, at a very young age, looked at me and said to me, you got to go out there in this world and do the things that you want to do. But remember, nobody is better than you, but you're not better than them. But you got to also treat people with respect, and you're going to see there's going to be experiences where people are not going to be respecting each other. Obviously, my industry it's not a very respectful industry at times. Even with this Me Too movement right now, we still have a lot of work to do.
Yep.
And but I remember I kind of had the same experience that Barbara. When I worked the first time in the kitchen, I said to myself, one day I'm going to be a leader, and I will never treat people the way that I've been treated. And that was something that was very important to me. And it's just, we have to realize that we all need each other and we all work with each other and we need to treat people with respect. It doesn't matter, if you are, the boss or not the boss. I dislike the word boss. I love the word as being a leader.
Everyone is a chef in my room.
Yes, everyone is a leader, and you need to be able to lead your team, but the team also is leading you. It's
right.
It's a give and take. So, the French, man. Got to change that.
Yes. But I think it is changing, and I think it's changing because
a little bit.
A new generation. Not entirely, but it's not like it used to be. So you mentioned something. So the issues around the Me Too movement and harassment is something that is deeply embedded in restaurant culture. A recent poll shows that 90% of women and 70% of men have been harassed in the workplace. Some big name chefs, Mario Batali and a number of other
John
chefs. John Besh just went down. Some of the chefs that have been really idolized for a long time. What do you think about what's happening in the restaurant culture? What do you think needs to happen? How have you dealt with this? Have you confronted this in your own restaurants?
Well, I mean, it's. I was having this conversation on my way here. Is sometimes people think because they are men, they are entitled to do whatever they want. But it's also, the society also have kind of fostered that behavior. It's about education. It's about giving people the tool to understand that behavior needs to change. Obviously, there is no tolerance for me for any sexual harassment, any discrimination or anything like that. I don't have to yell at them. I just look at them in the eyes and they know how I feel. This is, come on, we're just in 2018 and but we have to be very careful with this Me Too movement because a lot of people will tell you that they will change their way, but they're using this to be, not in a proper way. So there needs to continue. It needs to continue a lot of discussion, a lot of change. The media needs to also be able to help us, not about calling us and for us to point finger of whoever is bad. This is like I'm sick and tired of this. I was like, come on, tell me, who's the bad chef, It's like, no, you have a platform, help us. Yeah. We are the change. We are the voice. And, it's like in America, there is no leadership as far as government, Yeah. I think you have a president named Trump,
I've never heard of him.
But it starts with the people. It starts with us, and so every day we got to work at there. Every day we have to listen. Every day we have to make sure that people are in the safe place. And it's work, It's every day, It's so. I love my team, and my team is very important to me. It's like my family. So it's just. If you give them the tool and make them understand, and I hope they can take this and go to their family and at night and they treat also, it's a continuation of work,
And, I'm curious about, so men are the problem here, right? For the most part.
No, this is not a problem. They are.
As a man, I will just own the problem. And so then, but I asked you, so, this is definitely have to be a woman's-led moment of empowerment and change.
I think it should
because we're the ones we're the problem. So what should men be doing to help solve this? What's men's role?
Fucking wake up. Like,
Fair.
seriously,
Point taken.
your life is over.
Well,
for what?
Yes.
What? Is it to put your ego in place? Is it, what the fuck is it? That makes you feel like you're entitled to take advantage of anyone in general. But I have also, Besh, how many restaurants does that gentleman have? And not even have an HR, not even have a HR within your company. If you have over 900 employees, it's kind of odd, but it just shouldn't happen. And equality is, like, I could say to you, because you're the best chef, right? I'm just kidding. Like, are you at the Ritz? You know, because I'm at blah blah blah. But let's treat people with equality. I have a daughter who's 14. Do you think I don't wake up every day and just say a prayer that she's going to be amazing, and that she's going to have that strength to do the same thing I did, and say, listen, move on, or and just to not be taken advantage of. Yeah. We all have to fight for that, male and female. Yeah. Yeah.
But do you know what I will say to you, because you're a man, obviously?
Yes. I was referring to the men who weren't doing this.
No, but this is what I will say to the men.
Just to be clear.
I will not say you are the problem. I will say to them, you have an opportunity to change and to be the leader of the change. That's what I will say to them.
I totally agree with that. I want to finish on sort of the role of the chef. So in the White House, chefs did a lot. We planted a garden and did a lot of work on policy and politics. And you both are very active in bigger issues outside of just the kitchen. So what do you think the role of the chef is? And Barbara, I'd love to, you do a lot of work on food access, around fruits and vegetables, to tell us a little bit about that work.
That's coming to life very soon, so...
Did I just...
No, God, no, it's like...
Did I just do the big reveal? Sorry.
No, it's just timing and all of that jazz, but I think education, just because I actually didn't have it, I didn't grow up with an education, so education is very important to me. But I'm a visual learner, so I work with kids in schools. I have a foundation that teaches kids about agriculture, but not just food. It's entrepreneurship and leadership, mentorship, etc. Yes, I'm blessed because of what I have. I never thought I'd get this far. So giving back is just, it feels like that's what I should be doing. I kind of want to be a lobbyist someday in the White House, but because lobbyists, who fights for children, right? There's no money in it. So, that's our next generation, and they're going to be great. They already have a voice, and I can't wait to see what happens.
You do a lot of work as well. Tell me about how you see the role of a chef outside of just the kitchen.
Well, as a chef, we have a lot of responsibility, but when you look at this, food is the core of the society. And when you look at it, it's create a lot of things. There is consequences. In my, there is climate change, for example. I think it's up to 50 or 60% of the food production is the reason of the climate change. This is crazy. 1950 was the industrialization of food, the TV dinner. That's not a long time ago. In the course of almost 60 years over, we just destroyed this planet. So I think we have to really, everybody needs to be a part of it. We need to understand where the food comes from, how the production is done. We have to look at the way that the soil, we have to make sure that we create a place of not just consumption, but a place of balance. And it's all an ecosystem. If we don't take care of the planet and the humanity, then we have nothing. It's like, why are we thinking about going to Mars when we haven't figured out how we're going to live on this planet? So anyway.
Yes.
I'm not going to be the next president of the United States because I'm immigrant, but, it's just like we need to...
I think you got some votes here today. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so if we could thank Chef Dominique and Chef Barbara.
Thank you.
So now it's time for lunch. You have to go out and get your own lunch, just to be very clear. Doors are open at 2:20. Programming's at 2:45. It's going to be an amazing afternoon with Hillary Clinton, Margaret Atwood, a couple senators. So enjoy your lunch. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
The Women in the World 2018 Summit will resume after this lunch break. At this time, the theater and building will close. Please take all personal belongings with you. All unattended items left in the theater can be retrieved at Lost and Found, located on the orchestra level near coat check. Doors will reopen at 2:20, and the afternoon programming will begin at 2:45.